Okay. All right. Good afternoon, everybody. This is the March 7th, 2023 meeting of the Landmark Preservation Commission. I'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. Let's start with introductions to the commissioners. Larry, do you want to get started?
Yeah, I'm Larry Sykes. I'm an architect, and I was nominated by History Colorado.
I'm Ann Wattenberg. I'm an architect nominated by the American Institute of Architects. Hi, I'm Julie Johnson. I'm a historic preservation project manager, and I was nominated by the community at large.
Hello, I'm Gary Petrie. I'm an architect and was nominated by the Denver Planning Board.
I'm Kelly Wemple. I'm an architect, and I was nominated by the American Institute of Architects.
Hi, I'm George Dennis. I'm retired law enforcement. I live in a Landmark home.
I'm Erica Warzel. I'm an architectural historian and preservation consultant nominated by the community at large.
And I'm Erin Hummel. I'm a landscape architect, and I was nominated by the American Society of Landscape Architects.
Thanks, everybody. And
I'm Jane Capetto. I'm landmark staff.
And I think Graham's coming, but he'll introduce himself when he's here. It's running a little bit late. Okay, so we don't have any meeting records that we received today, so nothing for approval there. But we do like to reserve time at the beginning of every Landmark Preservation Commission meeting.
We do audio.
Oh, yes, we can. Let's do audio tips first. So for those of you joining virtually, there's up on the screen, there's some tips for making your audio better. We recommend that you click in the audio settings and bring up the additional menu that allows you to add the background noise suppression. That'll help with, ruffling of papers and little side conversations to help you hear better. And for those who are going to be presenting or commenting later virtually, there are expanded menu options that you can open up to adjust your microphone settings. Let us know if you're having any audio issues. Okay, but we do reserve some time at the beginning of every LPC meeting for public comments. I will say this is not for anything that we will be having a hearing or design review on today, because there will be public comment periods that are separate later for those. So this is just for general preservation matters. Is there anyone who's either on the line or in person who wanted to make a comment on general preservation matters? Don't see anyone in person. No hands raised.
And would you just remind people how to do that?
Yeah, so if you're joining us by phone, please dial *9. That's going to raise your hand so that we can see that you want to provide a comment. If you're joining by computer, use the hand raise button at the bottom of your screen in Zoom. And if you're in person, you can just raise your hand and we'll call on you. And we're going to yeah. Right, okay. Okay. All right, no public comments, so we'll keep moving forward. There are 3 projects on the consent agenda today. These are items that staff have deemed meet the design guidelines and that we've all reviewed in our packet. Commissioners, any issues? If not, would someone like to make a motion on the consent agenda?
Madam Chair, I'll make that motion. I move to approve the consent agenda as presented, which would be projects 2023-COA-049 at 3363 Bryant Street, project 2023-COA-054 at 3432 Newton Street, and 2023-TAXC-003 at 740 Emerson.
Thank you, Julie. Okay. Thanks, Erica. Great. Call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? All right, the motion passes unanimously. So if you're joining us today for one of the consent agenda items, your project has been approved, and feel free to hop off the line unless you'd like to stay present for the rest of the meeting. Okay, next up on our agenda, we do have one public hearing today. And you can see on the screen, this is the process for our public hearing. I'll go ahead and announce the project for the hearing. And staff will introduce the application and provide their recommendation, after which we'll hear from the applicants. In this case, this is an owner opposed designation, so there will be 10 minutes for the applicant, and then we'll also have 10 minutes to hear from the owner as well. After we've heard from both the applicant and the owner, we'll open it up for public comment. For public hearing, the comment period is 3 minutes per person. I will say if you are part of the applicant or owner team, you cannot provide public comment. You have to speak during that 10-minute block. All right, so after all public comments are heard, we'll close the hearing and move into deliberation and vote. So our hearing today is 2023L-002 at 1741 Gaylord Street for an individual landmark designation.
Wasn't on my screen.
Hi, my name is Kara Hahn. I am the Landmark Planning and Regulatory Supervisor, and we are here for the 1741 Gaylord Street, which is an owner-opposed designation. It is located in Council District 9 in the City Park West neighborhood. Here's an image of the property.
Oh, sorry, that's me. That's the remote control it for you. There you go. Sorry.
That's okay.
Cool.
There we
did
go.
it.
There we go. So this came through a certificate of demolition eligibility review process. So the owners of the property, 1741 Gaylord LLC, the three owners are here, or at least one of the owners is here in person to speak. They submitted a certificate of demolition eligibility application in August of this year. We as staff reviewed the application and found that it has potential to be a Denver landmark. We posted public notice on the property of the certificate of demolition eligibility application that pauses the process for 21 days. During that time period, members of the public came forward and submitted a notice of intent that would allow for continued discussion and dialogue between the property owners and the residents of the neighborhood. You guys heard this a couple of different times to extend the time period to allow for further dialogue and options. However, through the facilitated stakeholder meetings, no compromise could be reached. And at the end of the posting period, there were multiple, the three residents of Denver submitted a designation application. Since this time, there has been a few discussions with potential buyers that might be interested in purchasing the property. That has come about since the designation application has been submitted. So here it is. Here's an aerial view of the property, right in the City Park West neighborhood. And this is the proposed boundary. So as you can see, and I wanted to highlight for you, if you can use my mouse on it, yes it is. Okay, so this is the entire parcel. However, the applicants are only coming forward to designate the property itself, the building itself, and the property around it. And so the other property around it would not be designated as this designation application. They are interested in preserving the building and allowing for further development around it, but it is just for the building itself and not the full property parcel. So as you know, in order for a property to be designated per the landmark ordinance, it needs to maintain integrity, be 30 years of age or of exceptional importance. It needs to meet 3 out of 10 criteria, and you as the LCC must consider the historic context. For this particular designation application, it comes forward with 3 different criteria, B, C, and D. And I wanted to note that landmark staff wrote a staff report for the certificate of demolition eligibility, and then we wrote a staff report summarizing the application. However, we are not the applicants. We did not write the designation application. That came forward from the 3 applicants who wrote the application. So wanted to make sure that that was clear. So the application puts forward that the property has direct and substantial association with a recognized person or groups of persons who had influence on society. This particular property was built for Edward Holmes Hurlbut. His family was in the grocery store business. His father, Edward Kirk Hurlbut, started the family business, the Hurlbut Grocery Company. Edward H. was initially the secretary, and then after his father passed, he became president. Both the father and the son were noted in the Representative Men of Colorado in the 19th century as important members of the community. In regards to Edward Holmes Hurlbut, who was the one who owned this property, he expanded the business into a local chain, which was a newer thing. It wasn't done considered, they didn't have King Soopers on every store. You had various grocery stores, and to expand to a local chain was a much newer concept at that time. The Denver Post noted that he had traveled east and he had seen what is sort of AC, but it's recirculated cooler air that he put into his grocery stores. It was the first in the West, and the Denver Post noted that he set an example for how businesses should practice in Denver. He was members of various community groups, the Masons, and the Denver Country Club. Due to his wealth that was attained through this, he was able to move to the City Park West neighborhood, which was part of sort of the newer growth and the newer development within the city. And so he was able to construct a very large house on the property there. And so this was a house that was built for him and his family. And he is significant for his role in expanding the Hurlbut Company from 1 to multiple stores, and setting an example throughout Denver of how to conduct business in the area. The property is also significant for its second owners, James and Edith Berger. Berger was in the banking business. He was president of Union Depot and Trade Company, the Hamilton National Bank, and then he was vice president of the Denver National Bank. He also served on a couple of different boards for the American Bankers Association of Colorado. He was part of their executive council and then elected to be a vice president of the association. He was also a member of the Senate. The state representatives. I have that typed correctly. I apologize. He authored and passed a bill establishing a workshop for the mines, and then he was reelected the following term to the same position. He was a very high-ranking and nationally known member of the Masons, and so he was significant and had influence on society. But additionally, and perhaps more importantly, is Edith Berger. She was a founder of Children's Hospital. She was a board member for 19 years, and she was president of the Children's Hospital Association. She was president of the association as they were raising money in the early 1910s to build a new building. It was initially in a smaller house, and in order to build it, they wanted to build a 4-story building. So she was president of the association. She worked with Denver City Council to get the permits passed and to raise the money. And so she was a significant and important member of Children's Hospital. She is one of the primary reasons it's here. And so I would say that she is probably the most significant of the 3 people associated here. And while Children's Hospital itself may not note her on the website, as you will often see as historians know, those kinds of things aren't necessarily found on websites. But these are examples of articles in the Denver Post that talks about her lifetime accomplishments. And so we as staff concur with the application and find that the property has direct and substantial association with 3 members of Denver society, or Denver members who had influence on society. And then as we move on to criterion C, I wanted to talk a little bit about Discover Denver, as that was brought up in some of the comments. So Discover Denver is a partnership between the city and county of Denver, particularly community planning and development, and Historic Denver. It is funded by the State Historical Fund through History Colorado. It is a citywide survey program that since it's funded by History Colorado, follows state methodology on methodologies and reports, and we have to follow their requirements for the grant. So it works as a coordination between CPD and Historic Denver. We as CPD provide information like a lot of GIS software along with the staff. And then Historic Denver staff oversees and manages the program. And they help and manage community volunteers, interns, university grad students who help with field and historic research. Here's some photos of some people who are working on a project, and then I guess this one is in Virginia Village, given the image of the building there. So Historic Denver, Discover Denver goes and surveys every building in the city and county of Denver through different different neighborhoods. And at each level, there's a survey level for every type of building that's surveyed. So the foundation level, basically, we just look and see, what's the address and the year of construction. Every property gets that. Then, and that's basically GIS data. Then out in the field, there's the descriptive field. And so anything younger than 30 years of age just gets a photo. Anything that's older than 30 years of age but has really suspect integrity gets limited architectural info. They go out in the field with basically iPads or the Android version of that, and they take down the style, the type, and any modifications to the building. Then the third level is the evaluation, which is also done in the field. And those are older buildings older than 30 years that have pretty decent visibility. There you do detailed architectural info. They look at the cladding of the materials, the windows, does it have a porch? What are some of the site features? And based on that, they make a field evaluation based only on the architecture and whether or not there's district potential, which in the survey report is areas of significance. And so in the field, they just look at the architecture. This is the vast majority of buildings that are surveyed for Discover Denver. Then there's the enhanced or research section where they go and they pull all the data. This is a very small percentage of the buildings that are surveyed. It varies per neighborhood and is based on the grant of the percentage of buildings that are looked at. Right now, we do an enhanced form of about 2 to 3% of the buildings that we are looking at. Previously, we had done a little bit more. In the City Park West, we looked at 7% of the buildings for the enhanced research form. That percentage is based on Colorado and the grant. And so it is based on what are the 7% that we look at. It's based on what's out in the field. There's always professionals out in the field with volunteers. So they look at something, we think this might have something interesting. What stories have been told to us by the neighbors? They see us all out there. So they're wearing a little button that says Discover Denver. You see sort of the symbol on the upper right-hand side. They look at types of buildings, sizes of buildings, but there's not a hard and fast rule of what that percentage is or what they look at. In this particular case, for the enhanced forms, it was 7% in the City Park West, and for architectural historians will understand this, no one else is going to care. What that looks like is a modified 1403 inventory form. That is a form number that is assigned by the state of Colorado. It is also somewhat similar to our demo and CDE research. For this particular property at 1741 Gaylord, it was surveyed at the evaluation level, which is anything older than 30 years with decent integrity. This has really good integrity. It's detailed architectural info. So like it would have said, brick cladding and the coins and the porch and it would have gone with the style. It would have told us the other materials, for chair, anything like that. It would be evaluated on the architecture and then the potential for a district. There was no enhanced research. There was no additional historic research performed. The historic, geographic, or cultural significance was not evaluated by Historic Denver. So for the field evaluation, they found that it was architecturally significant. However, the surrounding area lacked cohesion for a district or an area of significance, so it wasn't pointed out as being in the area of significance. And then it was noted that further research would be needed to determine if it was individually eligible. Which leads us to the research that we did when we posted. And so for this particular property under criterion C, the application put forward, it agreed with the Discover Denver survey that it was architecturally significant. In this case, as a Dutch colonial revival, as is in the side gambrel roof, the overhanging eaves, the dormer, the symmetrical facade, the pediment with the round window, the balcony supported by columns above the main entrance, the front door flanked by side lights, the 8/1 windows, the very classical detailing of the brackets, dentils, and coins, and then also the gable-end chambers. History Colorado Style Guide. This is almost every single element that is there is found on this building, and so staff concurs that this property is significant under criterion C as good example of a Dutch colonial revival. And then finally, we're going to look at criterion B, which is for a significant architect. So I wanted to note about History Colorado's architectural bios. I used to work for History Colorado, and Erica, who worked there much longer than I can, may be able to add more in your deliberation. But I did talk with Patrick Eidman, who is the Chief Historic Preservation Officer and Deputy SHPO at History Colorado, and wanted to ensure that my understanding of these architectural bios was the same as his. And so the architectural bios put out by History Colorado are for informational purposes. They're general bibliographical information, and it's a starting point for further research. They are not a comprehensive list, neither is a selection of the architects of which are included and which are not, nor the buildings included on here. This is just a starting point from which people might want to gather additional information. It is also a volunteer program that is run by History Colorado. History Colorado staff, and in particular, I believe the Preservation Planning Unit oversees this, and they are done by members of the public, grad students, and/or professionals, oftentimes people who are newer to the state and want to get to know the preservation community will volunteer to write these. So these are not comprehensive, but they are just general information that the state is providing about particular architects who they have found to be important in the state of Colorado. But they are not comprehensive, and something on or not on the list is not to be noted as being significant or not. So for this particular property, it is the work of Gove and Walsh. They're a prominent duo that formed an architectural firm. They worked on commercial and civic buildings along with a few residential. Aaron Gove went to Colorado School of Mines and then the University of Illinois. He worked under Rochelaub until he started his firm with Walsh. Walsh worked in a variety of Chicago firms and also was the supervisor of the construction of Rochelaub's Trinity Methodist Church. So they had a connection with Rochelaub before they founded their firm. So they, like I said, particularly did large-scale commercial and civic buildings. They did the central portion of Union Station. They did a variety of other things. But I also looked at and pulled all of the permits from 1889 to 1914. Anyone who's done that, you know, there's a spreadsheet at historic or at Denver Public Library. So I pulled and looked at 1,000 page of both of those. Looked at all of the permits done by Gove and Walsh, and they're primarily commercial. There are a few incidentals. I found some interesting ones. They built barns, car barns, and then they lifted the roof of something. It doesn't tell us where. They did a handful of residential buildings. Based on, they didn't have addresses on most of those. It's mainly lots and blocks. So I pulled up as many of the lots and blocks as I could find. Sometimes it just said Grant Street. They didn't give me any other visual description. So based on what I was able to find, about 10 to 12 of the residential buildings are left. Of those, one is an individual landmark, and there are maybe a couple of historic districts, at least one, but possibly 2 or 3. Again, because Pennsylvania Street, you have Quality Hill, you have Pennsylvania Street Historic District, so it's a little bit of a guessing thing. So this particular property is a significant example of their work. They don't do very many residential buildings, and not many of the residential buildings are left. This is a great example of a high-style example of their work. So it is a fairly rare example of Gove and Walsh's work. And it is particularly, it was highlighted by the city as one of the most beautiful 25 homes in Denver for, I believe, the 1910 municipal fact. So the fact that it is one of their rare surviving resources, that they are renowned architects within the city and county of Denver. They also worked along that range. And that it was highlighted by the city itself as being one of 25 beautiful homes in Denver. This is a significant example of the work of Gove and Walsh. In terms of a property, in order to meet our ordinance requirements, it has to meet 3 out of 10 criteria, and then it has to retain integrity. So that's just basically the preservation way of saying, does it look like what it used to look like? So in this case, there have been some minimal changes to it. There has been a reconstruction of the porch based on some historic photos in this. It looks very similar, it's very compatible, but it does appear that the porches have been reconstructed. There are also some rear additions and a large ADA ramp at the rear of the property. However, those do not impede the integrity being Bay. It's in its original location. The design is still evident, as you can see, in its form, its roof form, its materials, has excellent materials and workmanship, even with the front porch being slightly altered. And the setting, feeling, and association is still there. It's still in a neighborhood that is primarily residential in nature. There have been some larger scale residential built around it, but it's still a residential neighborhood. And although it has been used as offices more recently instead of a residential building, there's still the feeling and association as you look at this building as a residential structure built in the early 1900s with retains integrity. And then the ordinance requires that you guys consider the historic context. So the context of this is it was designed in a high style by renowned Denver architects. It was constructed in an up-and-coming suburb for families of Denver's sort of newer upper class. The building reflects the context of Denver's expansion of the city as it developed eastward and shows new form of industrial growth as the economy transitioned from one primarily mining and agriculture to one more based on commerce. For the period of significance, we as staff felt like the period of significance should be shortened from 1903 to 1927. I believe it's 1902 to much more recent, 2021, I believe, or 2020. And we feel that based on, it should be based on the construction date and extended to the ownership of the Berger family, particularly the death of Edith Berger in 1927. The historic context really does talk about that later development and the uses over time, but because it's not as clearly tied to the statements of significance, we felt like the period of significance should reflect the statements of significance rather than the larger historic context. The historic context does really talk about the development of the neighborhood over time. And then in terms of the public comment that we received. So we received from RNOs, our registered neighborhood organization, we received support letters from CHUN, from City Park West, the Whittier Neighborhood Association, and then Historic Berkeley Regis. 3 of those are either adjacent to or part of this neighborhood. We received petitions with 33 individuals in support. And then we received letters or emails, 17 in support, 3 in opposition, and 1 is neutral. It's one that was emailed to you, and it basically said, this is a really hard decision with lots of nuance, best of luck to you all. I thought it was a great thing that was just amazing. You guys got that. It was the last one you should have gotten. So I thought that was great. I did want to note that, the majority of the people were fairly close to the property who wrote these. In terms of the letters, there's 17 in support, about a dozen of them are in the City Park West neighborhood. In terms of petitions, about 2 dozen of the signed are in the neighborhood or close by in adjoining neighborhoods. There were a couple, one person wrote in from Colorado Springs and one from Docomomo in Littleton, I believe. But overall, it's showing strong support from the neighborhood. And then you also received yesterday the owner's comments. They are in opposition to the designation, and then the comments came in 3 different groups based on each of the criteria. So you should have received that with the email, their written comment, and then additional research and support materials. And so we, as landmark staff, find that it meets the criteria. It is over 30 years of age. The application meets at least 3 out of 10 criteria. We found that the building retains integrity as discussed in the designation application. We found that the historic context was thorough, and we'd like you to consider it. And we would recommend approval and forward to City Council of the designation application. I'm happy to answer any questions you guys might have now or later. Are there any questions to staff?
Okay. Is the applicant privilege or applicant?
Oh, yeah. I'm Scott Holder, I live at 20.
Oh, hold on. You were right on top of it. When we found it.
I'm just looking for a picture to use as background. Okay, fantastic.
All right.
Great. No. There you go. All right, now I'm ready. Sorry, Scott.
I'm Scott Holder, I live at 2315 North Williamson. Read the application for Karis
prominence of this house in terms of architectural design and standards, not just within City Park West, but all of Denver, is reason enough to landmark this building. The fact that it's one of the few remaining Govan Walsh residential buildings left is reason enough to landmark this building. The prominence of its early owners, including one of the founders of Children's Hospital, and its evolution into a historic neighborhood icon during the Judy's House era, is reason enough to landmark the building. However, I want to highlight a point we did not put into the application. That's the building's symbolic representation of business success in Denver, something other than mining. The original owners were highly successful. What a highly successful business people typically do. They build homes that represent their wealth and their success. And what the Hurlbuts did in 1902 is not unlike what a successful developer might do 110 years later with building a custom home in Hilltop. Different neighborhood, century time difference, same sentiment. Businesses disappear from the public consciousness, only to become a footnote in the city's history. But homes of people such as this not only last, they tell a story for themselves. These homes are symbolic representations of the city's history. And such a cultural legacy is vitally important to keep alive. These enduring icons are not only a testament to the architectural history of the city landscape, but an enduring reflection of the business history of Denver. People who build homes like this, the businesses are long gone, but these glorious houses remain. Any successful business person in the city can identify what it took to put that house there, particularly one that's still standing 120 years after it was built. We have a strong case as to how a parcel such as this, with a house such as this, can be adapted for contemporary needs of Denver. It need not be demolished just in the name of more housing, when preservation and housing needs can both be met here. But in order to take that case before City Council, we need this commission to approve our landmark application. And we urge the commission to take that positive action.
I offer the application. Yeah, my name is Michael Flowers. I'm Director of Preservation Action with Historic Denver. Our office is at 1420 Ogden Street. We're a nonprofit organization that exists so that Denver's unique identity, cultural landmarks, and historic places are thoughtfully maintained, actively used, and relevant for all generations. As an organization, we often support communities and neighborhoods finding solutions for endangered properties. We worked in good faith during mediation to help find a compromise, and after those discussions ended, assisted community members in writing, editing, and submitting the landmark designation for the property. Historic Denver fully supports the landmark designation for the Hurlbut House at 1741 Gaylord Street, City Park West. This property is important to the neighborhood and is telling the story of City Park West's development. We believe it is eligible for landmark designation by meeting 3 criteria. We also believe it would be a substantial loss to the history of City Park West and the city of Denver. This property, the Hurlbut House, was designed by renowned architects Govan Walsh, with their mark on the city of Denver by designing gems like Union Station, the Sugar Building, and numerous commercial buildings in Lodo. They also designed a number of homes for Denver's wealthy business class that helped shape the city at the beginning of the 20th century when City Park West was heavily developed. This is a well-designed house and a significant remaining example of the residential work, many of which have been launched. Edward H. Hurlbut developed a successful chain of grocery stores, which, as indicated, was a newer concept at the beginning of the 20th century, displaying his business acumen. Along with his influence in the business community, Hurlbut was also noted in his obituary as being a benefactor of both public and private projects. Edward H. Hurlbut commissioned the home from Govan Walsh, which would be constructed between 1902 and 1903. Later residents, Edith and James Berger, were also influential and significant. James made his mark as a banker and a politician, while Edith became one of the founders of Children's Hospital and served on the board for 19 years. Last but not least, the home is a significant example of Dutch colonial revival style in Denver. While there are other Dutch colonial houses, many were not designed on as grand a scale as this. It remains a prime example of the style and has a high amount of historic integrity. Center gable subtype of this style is also a bit rare nationwide. McAllister's Field Guide for American houses notes that it's about 5% of the colonial revival style has this subtype feature. The house is an architectural gem that is recognizable in the neighborhood, and the landmark designation will ensure it stays that way for years to come. Thank you for your time.
Great, work with that. Hello, my name is Carrie Herbert, and I'm a resident in City Park West, and one of the applicants for this.
1741 Gaylord is clearly a home with significance to Denver's history and to the history of City Park West neighborhood. It's also clearly a home with architectural significance, but this home has even greater significance. City Park West has always drawn a mix of people of different income levels, and this large home that sits in a neighborhood built with duplexes and bungalows and apartments really exemplifies that. For decades, residents of City Park West have valued its mix of residential and commercial, row houses and apartments alongside single-family homes. Even through the scourge of redlining, City Park West was deliberately marginalized into decline. Diverse groups of people continue to be homes there. City Park West is now one of the most architecturally rich neighborhoods in Denver. It has a unique history that reflects the evolution and the struggles of Denver as a whole. But that history and unique character are being lost, permit by permit, as historically significant homes are being scraped, and there's little left to help new residents understand and appreciate the history of their new neighborhood. We support affordable housing, and we want this neighborhood to evolve and to remain relevant to Denver in the 21st century. But we have to address these needs softly. The effects of redlining were still very much seen and felt in Denver. Formerly redlined neighborhoods are the ones that are being most developed and are the most susceptible to demolition and erasure. So you might hear today, you may have already seen some of the comments about the need for housing in Denver and how that need makes demolishing historic homes like this necessary. And you might hear that a lot of housing units will be added through this development that's being planned. But consider that almost all of those apartments will be one bedroom and studio apartments that will rent at market rates. The greatest need for homes in City Park West is affordable homes for families. Families have been priced out of our neighborhood for many years, especially those who have the deepest roots in this community. And now, Whittier Elementary and Cole Arts and Science Academy, EPS schools that serve City Park West have been identified for possible closure because of low enrollment, which is a direct result of the increasing inaffordability in the area for families. So this development will do nothing to address that need. We can do better. We don't have to sacrifice our neighborhood's history and unique place in Denver. We know that with creative thinking and commitment, we can meet the needs that our city is currently facing and also maintain City Park West as a place of significance in Denver's history and as a space of diversity in a growing and changing city. Thank you. Your address? 2037 York Street.
Hi, my name is Peggy Muldoon. I'm also one of the applicants. I'm at 1705 Gaylord Street, Unit 105. Majestic, grand, stately. These are a few words that I've heard people use to describe 1741 Gaylord. I'll also add neighborhood connector, as it's a vital part of the neighborhood fabric. Denver's history is alive in this house. The architects designed it, to the families that lived in it, to the countless lives that have been touched and healed from time at Judy's house. As a volunteer at Judy's house, I've seen firsthand how this house connects people and helps to rebuild their lives. This house connects our past to the present. City Park West deserves this neighborhood anchor to live on, and I ask you to designate it as a landmark. Thank you.
Questions for the applicant? I guess I just have one question. That is the other meeting. Feedback on staff, comments about the period of you're amenable to, the recommended modifications of the period of significance and Did you say it a little louder?
Yeah, we think that'd be fine.
Okay. All right, no other questions? Okay, let's get to the owner.
Okay.
Where you are on the camera.
I need this space to lay out my stuff, center the table or something, but I need to be able to lay out my documents that we talk about.
Yeah,
Is that possible to do that?
yeah, I think so. What I'll do is I'll turn the screen off so that you can.
Or move the laptop over there, whatever's
Yeah.
convenient.
Yeah.
Okay.
Once you're all set up, you can just start your meeting address for the record.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Sure.
There we go.
Thank you for allowing me. My name is Michael Matheson, 651 Fairfax, Colorado. I office out of 1741 Gaylord Street. I'm also the owner of the property next door to 2190 State Gas. We'll start construction late next week. I did want to say we do have a lot of signatures from people in the neighborhood. They're all people that both next door neighbors, people that are on the street. They're all a block of the house. We have 12 signatures with 4 more that we people agree to sign, we sent over to the place. So they're all within a block. These are people that are, 5 blocks away or don't live there or those types of things. So I wanted to say that. I also did want to address some of the issues that Tara brought up. I appreciate if people want to save the home. Of course, people want to save homes in Denver. I'm redoing 3134 Walnut right now, which is a 1887 steel mill, Thompson Pipe and Steel, which is only 2 buildings like it, which is Denver Rock Grill. This building, we're putting in a distillery and a beer garden and a taco steel bar, higher end taco bar, but it's a very unique structure. There's only 2 of them in the city that are like that. And so, like I also restored one of the Denver Bear founders' homes as well many years ago. So I'm not against historic preservation. However, in this case, as an owner of this property and developer, and I also own a construction company, I read the Discover Denver report and I did a lot of research on it. And there's no way for someone like me to read that research, and I don't think that research is properly represented. I'm going to go into that. But I don't think somebody can read all that and buy any property over 30 years old in Denver. The property is, in this report, there were multiple consultants. I mean, every consultant you could possibly think of. I would like to also ask, I think it was $1.5 million expenditure on this report. I'd like to clarify with staff, is that correct? Okay, I think for the different reports, it was a large grant. So some of the consultants that were involved were Corbett AHS, I think everybody here is familiar with, American Historical Society, Bead and Hunt, all relevant Denver RNOs, Historic Denver, Denver Community Plan Development, Winter and Company, the Colorado Office of Archaeology and Historic Preservation, methodologies developed by the City of Los Angeles for their own historic survey. So this was a very, very significant report. And, every single home in the neighborhood, so there were 861 parcels in total looked at. However, if you read through the report, and I don't know who's read through the report and hasn't, but, every single home that was not modified significantly for 11 only, or a parking lot, every single family home made it to the evaluation, the minimum level to make it. This was the 16th such survey, okay, on the home. So this is the 16th time that since 1973, Denver, starting with Denver Landmark Preservation Commission, Barbara Dorgan, in the report, all this information there. So this has been looked at 16 different times. This was an extremely thorough report with multiple consultants looking at every single family home, and it was mainly around single family homes. And so at this time, there were 18 single family homes that were already designated historic, including a Dutch colonial just like this on the same street. It's not like the Dutch colonial prohibited or anything else like that. One of those 18 homes on the same street is the Dutch colonial, the exact same size home. So then I sent everybody this information. This was not of something that was done prior. Like, this was an entire database that was done. This is 3,000 photographs. This was a team of people looking at every single home, every single one of them, and photographing and looking at them in great detail and determining what are historic houses that could be saved. That was the intent of this program. And the other intent was looking at areas of significance. And this was done with an Olympus Tough PG 630 digital camera at 12 mil resolution, highest level type of camera. Every single home got 3 photographs. And then it was uploaded to a database, and then it was re-reviewed. And this was every single property. So it wasn't just some, we're looking at something, we're trying to get, just a little bit of an idea of what's going on in the neighborhood. This is significant. This is a multi-year process. And this was only completed in December of 2019. I used this report a year and a half later to buy this property. That was significant. This is the home that's right on the same street that is considered historically significant in this very report. However, this home was not in this report, nor was it even mentioned in anything as far as the level here, which went to the enhanced level. It didn't go to the enhanced level. So if you look on page 24, and I provide this information, but so 326 homes went to the evaluation level, 383. 35 went to the enhanced level that we looked at these being historic homes. There was no, I heard Sarah say, well, we only had a limited amount of money, or there was only 7% that could be looked at. That wasn't what happened. Every single home was looked at thoroughly in the neighborhood, photographed, uploaded to the database, and reviewed, and history was looked at. So, almost all the homes, almost all the single-family homes in the dwelling, between 1890 and 1899, 191 were built, 1999, 132. So the majority of homes were built in that 19 years. This is the list, very clear list of the homes that are historic homes, which are 18 homes. This report wanted to expand that number 350%. I'm sorry, this is the list of homes they want to expand to. So there's 18 current homes, but this project expanded that list of homes that should be considered historic or look to be historic by 350%. Another 61 homes. That's a very significant number. It's not like 1 or 2 homes or 3 homes or something like that. Then they looked at areas of significance. Areas of significance are 80% of the neighborhood. 80% of the neighborhood is taken up of areas of significance, where the entire area be considered historic. This is neither in the areas of significance, nor was it considered one of the 35 homes, nor was it considered one of the 61. So as a purchaser, how are you ever going to know when your city landmark department does this exhaustive study, and then you read this information and you have no idea that at the end, and the information at the end isn't even correct. But this is extensive. Area 1, Area 2, and Area 3, and also the Wyman Historic District are most of the neighborhoods. So then also, they've labeled every single other house, the 336 I mentioned, can need further review. You can further review them. So every house, I guess, now is open in the neighborhood. So the city of Denver, by this report, is saying we control 80% of all the property rights in the neighborhood. With this report, by saying that we can further look at any of these homes. And they listed it by NC, ND, one evaluation, and the other one is C. Well, C is only for areas of significance. Yet on this home, they put C, and all the other homes that were not areas of significance, they put C as well. So really, every single home in the entire neighborhood, outside of the 11 that were completely remodeled, the 11 that are parking lots, at the city of Denver's discretion, can be historic at any time when someone files a demolition report. That's not the intent of this report. The intent was to identify the 61 homes, look at the 18 homes that are historic, and look at homes that are historic. Now it's been turned into something, well, anytime someone's going to buy a home and demolish it, this is something that we're going to stop the development in the neighborhood. And, it's all clearly in the report. I'm not sure if it's read or who hasn't read the report, but we did look at compromise. We did say the city can allow us to do five stories built around the building. And we also looked at taking out the back of the building, or just at the front of the building and a little bit on each of the sides. We looked at that. The city of Denver didn't want to give us that kind of zoning. You can't park that property. It's very important to have parking in that neighborhood. There's no parking around there. So we have 37 workforce housing that are 80 to 120 AMI. So that's the range. This isn't just market rate housing. And it's also, it has parking for requirement, police officers, people work at the hospital. One of the people running for the district there is East High School, had a teacher there that would like to live in the area and live in one of these places. So that's one of the issues I'm gonna bring up. The other one is on the people that are well-known here. So, you know, if we're talking about people that are well-known,
You do have 40 seconds left.
okay, people that are well-known, like Phil Anschutz or Don Cheadle or Wellington Webb or Paul Sandoval or Vance Kirkland, Hurlburt was the son of the owner. He was not the one that expanded the grocery stores. That was done by the father. He expanded 4 grocery stores. That was done by 1904. The son took over when the father died in 1907, and he owned the grocery store for 8 years. There was no significance there. That was sold to the largest grocery store in the West that was a block away 8 years later, and Edward Holmes Hurlburt was no longer involved. This is not somebody that was of significance. I don't have the Edith Berger information. I'd like to get that from the city. That has not been provided to me, that level of detail, so I can't rebut that today. But I'd like an opportunity to rebut that. Okay, yeah.
Okay, are there any questions for the applicant? Or, sorry, the owner?
I just have one question. You had in your written comments, about Edward Holmes Hurlburt.
Yeah.
You had a comment that said not an original owner. And I wanted to clarify, is that regarding the grocery business or this house?
So the grocery business. So the grocery business, he was the secretary of the business. And as far as the gentleman of the West, that was a case publication that people put together.
No, I understand, yeah.
Yeah, and hopefully you understood that. But no, he's the original owner of the house, 100%. He was not the owner of the founder of the grocery.
Okay.
Other questions?
I have a question for staff, and I don't know if this is the right time to ask her.
Is it just for staff, or is it something that the owner would need to say?
I guess what I'm sort of interested in staff's understanding of the expansion of the slits. And I don't know if that may not be appropriate now.
Let's talk about that after. The Discover Denver list.
Correct.
Yeah, thank you.
Have you answered any questions? No other questions? Okay, well, thank you for your time. I do appreciate that.
Right.
Slide through to the public comment section. Great, you can see that slide. What are we in person?
Yeah.
Okay, let me look. All right, people, well, no, there are more people virtually, but.
Well, all right, so we're gonna open it up for public comment. So we'll go ahead and start with those who are. If anyone is interested in public comment.
But it's not for the applicant team, it's not for the ownership. Yeah,
Yeah.
You're there already.
Yeah.
And let me, there's a little bit of pressure on that, I noticed.
So, once Jim gets that question, you'll have up to 3 minutes per person, and maybe obviously you can start your name again.
My name is Joella.
Hold on. I'm doing a lot of things. Excuse me.
Okay. My name is Joella Unseed. I live at 1915 East 22nd Avenue. I'm the president of City Park West Neighborhood Association. Lived in the neighborhood since 1984. In 1984, when I came to the neighborhood, we started the Uptown Development Corporation to try to save some of the buildings that were getting eaten up by the hospitals. Chuck Brannigan started that, and we started the hospital design committee to try to keep the integrity of the neighborhood. So I am getting to be an old-time resident now and slowly watching our lovely neighborhood disappear a building at a time. I'm not going to reiterate the history and all that. I think you've heard enough of that. I wanted to talk about when we flyed the neighborhood, we flyed every house in the neighborhood about this. The comments were all to save the building, and people were talking about, when is this going to stop? We're losing the history, we're losing the integrity of the neighborhood, one building permit at a time. And I believe that one reason why this is a lucrative project for a developer, because they were fortunate enough to secure 2 lots right next to each other. And I think that's a lot in the mix here. The East Central Area Plan is the key plan recommendation that they wanted to increase historic preservation by making it easier to reuse existing buildings, create more historic districts, and ensure new buildings fit in with the surrounding neighborhood. I will tell you, as the president of the neighborhood association, we lose, we aren't paying attention, or we don't have developed jobs, we're volunteers, we're trying to hit here and here and here and here. And I feel like we have to pay attention and save these buildings. Our neighborhood is just, it is just going away. And Gaylord Street has been a historic street. And I think one of the reasons it doesn't have the designation is because before 19, when that study was done, much of the development was already happening and taking away a lot of the historic buildings on the street. So I just plead with you to listen to the neighbors and help us save the integrity of the neighborhood. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jeff Lee. I live at 2338 North Franklin. So I'm the president of the Whittier Neighborhood Association, and I'm speaking on behalf of our board. And I went by and this building and the neighborhood. In fact, I've walked by it many times with my wife. My wife's name is Judy, so we always thought, oh, look at that. And it's a beautiful building, and its integrity to the neighborhood. Integral to the neighborhood. So we don't want to see more of that creep down. City Park West, they're coming for video next.
My name is Sandra Holder, and I live at 2315 North Williams Street. So I'm right on the dividing line between Whittier and City Park West. I was born and raised in Denver, East Denver. Growing up, I used to ride my bike around the neighborhood, Park Hill, Congress Park, Cheeseman Park, and yes, City Park. And I marveled at the beauty of all the old brick homes that were so characteristic of Denver. Never got tired of exploring the city block by block, admiring the magnificent old homes. After graduating from CU, career and family considerations led me to leave Denver, and I have lived much of my adult life on the East Coast in the Midwest. But I never stopped thinking of Denver as my real home. Traveled a lot for work, and I've had the opportunity to visit most of the larger cities in the U.S. Only a handful have made a lasting impression on me, however, making me want to return later on my own. Those were the cities that felt truly unique, due largely to well-preserved neighborhoods that reflected the city's history and its role in the history of our country. Think of the colonial brick row houses of Philadelphia and Boston, the Greek revival homes of Savannah, Georgia, and the New Orleans Garden District, and the Victorian painted ladies of San Francisco. What would any of those cities be without those iconic neighborhoods? How many people visit or even move there just to experience that sense of place which these well-preserved neighborhoods lend to the city? 4 years ago, my husband and I decided to move back to Denver to start a new chapter in our lives. Exploring the city again, I've developed an even greater appreciation for the truly unique history of the Queen City and its importance in the westward expansion of the nation. But I've also been concerned at the truly alarming loss of historic properties in the core of the city. Please don't think I'm just anti-development. One of the reasons we chose to move back here is because of the new vibrancy and sophistication that has come to Denver, thanks to development of neighborhoods that were stagnant or blighted when I was younger. Denver has a lot more to offer now than when I was young. but I'm also deeply disturbed at the recklessness with which the city has handled or failed to handle the preservation of the properties that are key parts to the city's charm and identity in the first place. Houses like the Hurlbut House. As the founder of a wholesale and retail grocery store in the 1890s, the original owner embodied the early Denver businessmen who worked to supply goods to the city of Denver and settlers heading west. The grand scale of the building and its incomparable style, thanks to prominent local architect Coven Walsh, are testaments to the important contributions of these early businessmen to the growth of the success of the city. In summary, the Hurlbut House exemplifies
Mary Johnson. I've been a realtor in Denver for over 16 years, and I've lived in the area surrounding 1741 Gaylord just as long. As a realtor, I have a unique insight into the minds of the people who are in and out of our city. The majority of my clients choose neighborhoods like City Park West in large part because of beautiful historic homes throughout. They value the aesthetics as well as the history these homes represent. Homes like 1741 Gaylord are rare and irreplaceable. Once the beautiful architectural materials, the fireplaces, the intricate trim, and all of the handcrafted details of this home are gone, they can never be recreated. In my years as a realtor, I've worked with several developers and sold many homes. I know there's a need for more housing supply. That supply does not have to come at the expense of our city's history and beauty. The developer can build apartments anywhere in the city. There are hundreds of apartment buildings similar to the one proposed by this developer in the surrounding area. They are a dime a dozen. There is only one 1741 Gaylord. There are vacant lots and homes in Porsche currently on the market blocks of this property, which are far better candidates to scrape from his project. The developer does not have to build apartments on this exact property at the expense of this one-of-a-kind historic home. 1741 Gaylord could be repurposed into multiple condominium units or kept as a single-family home, keeping intact the original charming details that make up this stunning mansion. Over the years, I've had the privilege of touring so many similar former single-family mansions in Capitol Hill, Whittier, City Park West, and Cole with my clients, in which developers have strategically separated them into multi-families while keeping the one-of-a-kind details and exterior facades. Buyers are drawn to this type of unit because they are unique and have charm that cannot be recreated. This home has also proven to be a desirable property in its current state, as evidenced by the buyer inquiries which have come in even without the home being listed for sale. I'm not against development, only development at the expense of the character of our historic neighborhoods. The home at 1741 Gaylord deserves to be preserved and cared for, not to end up in a landfill.
Say one question on the, or say one thing about buyer inquiries, because that's not an accurate fact. I don't know if you want to hear that.
I'm sorry, you're cutting off.
Okay, fine.
Hi, my name is Hannah Warner. I live at 1601 14th Avenue, but I work at 1760 Gaylord, right across the street. And the building that I work in is a lumber-baron mansion, and it's gorgeous on the inside. Like, I think it's kind of crazy that there aren't pictures of the inside of 1791 because I imagine the interior are as impressive as the exterior. I also just want to say I find it very suspect that someone could look at this building and not think that it was historic and then buy it thinking that there wouldn't be any historic issues. It clearly is. I feel like he misrepresented the report. I feel like this home wasn't included in the report because it wasn't on the correct side of the street where the rest of the like quote unquote historic homes are. It was across the street and just coming up surrounding homes. Based on like what Kara was saying, that's what it seems like to me. So I feel like he's misrepresenting the report. And also just like I looked up one of the former projects, 44 Tennyson, I think is what it's called. And it looks like shipping containers just like stacked on top of each other. So it just doesn't seem like he has any like, he doesn't seem to value architecture at all. Like, he's gonna tear down something that's lasted for over 100 years and build something that he can build quickly and cheaply, and I imagine will end up being demolished. It's also like, do we want to keep building buildings that aren't intended to last for centuries, just to like profit? And it's just, I mean, it just doesn't make sense to me. And it's kind of crazy that the onus of like not having a building like this destroyed is on people and the community as opposed to on the developer. You should have to prove why this is like, why this home should be demolished, which it really shouldn't be. Yeah, and it's too bad that there aren't interior pictures. Anyone else want to speak to that? All right. Let's check those virtually.
Thank you for your patience. We'll get to everyone who has their hands raised on Zoom, and please raise your hand if you haven't yet. If you'd like to make a public comment on the hearing.
First one we have is Quinta Mosby Tyler. Okay, you should see a unmute button. Yep.
Hi, everyone.
Great,
Should I start?
Yeah,
Okay.
yes.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Donita Mosby Tyler. I'm the CEO of the Equity Project, and our office is right across the street from 1741 Gaylord. I bought our building at 1718 Gaylord last year because the history of the street mattered a great deal to me. And as a business, I was particularly moved by the richness of the intersections of the history of the street. It's why I purchased the building that I did on the street that I did. I'm present today in this meeting because I'm concerned about the prevalence of erasure of history in our city. Painfully, as a Black person, I'm faced with this erasure of my own history. And frankly, it's even harder when I'm also impacted by the erasure of the history of our built environments. I'm just urging you to help in the preservation of important parts of our collective history, even when the history is complicated. I think we have to hold the fidelity of the whole story as it helps us to weave what I think is the beautiful tapestry that reflects all of us. Edith Berger, the founder of Children's Hospital, might be pleased to know that right across the street from her building would be me, the first Black woman in the executive suite in the history of Children's Hospital, Colorado. Our built environment can help us in bridging the gaps of understanding in our communities. I really believe that. And preservation helps us in recovering lost stories, reclaiming a narrative, and pursuing restorative justice. I urge you, maybe in many ways I'm begging you, to please preserve the fidelity of 1741 Gaylord Street. Thank you for allowing me the space to share.
Thank you.
All right, next, I'm starting to do this. Child Taylor Jr., you're not supposed to say button. Oh, back there, you do that, I do this. Sorry. So Bruce is next. There's the unmute button that you'll find, should be bottom left of your screen. There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Hi, my name is Bruce Coy, and I live at 1394 Vine Street. I'm the co-chair of CHUN History Matters and also a board member of CHUN. Capitol Hill United Neighborhoods, or CHUN, is Denver's largest and oldest registered neighborhood organization. We include the City Park West neighborhood in our boundaries, and we are very aware of ensuring that community voices are heard and decisions that impact the built environment of the greater Capitol Hill neighborhoods are informed. I think the previous speaker summed it up so well. I just want to say that the letter of support that we wrote did not come easily to us. We know that this is an owner-opposed property in terms of its landmark designation, but we came easily to the decision recommended by History Matters and then approved by consensus of the full CHUN board that this property deserves recognition as a landmarked property. We also, as an organization, are co-owners of the Tiers McFarland Mansion right on Cheeseman Park. And it's a beautiful example of how such a building can be retained for future generations by being creative in its adaptive use. And we believe that this property is an example of that as well. For over 120 years, this home has had many lives in its storied past. Buildings are designed by people, for people, and the stories they tell are an important part of our city's narrative. We should not lose this historic gem that represents the best of City Park West. We support the landmark designation. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
It looks like we have Marie is next.
Hi. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Good afternoon. My name is Marie Edgar and I live in the Berkeley Regis neighborhood of North Denver, and I belong to Historic Berkeley Regis. I'm delighted to share this letter, part of this letter that was written to the Landmark Commission. Greetings. Historic Berkeley Regis, a nonprofit corporation advocating for retention and appreciation of significant historic resources in Denver's Berkeley Regis neighborhood, strongly supports the designation of the Hurlbut House as a historic landmark. As found by the LPC staff, the house clearly maintains excellent historic integrity, meets the required number of significant criteria, and is of the appropriate age for designation. Having engaged in a multi-year effort to achieve landmark status for an outstanding building in our neighborhood, the Berkeley Park Chapel, designated in 2020, we are well aware of the qualities and significance required for a building to meet Denver's landmark criteria. We have reviewed the Hurlbut House landmark designation application and believe it thoroughly and convincingly documents the properties that qualify the house for designation. Historic Berkeley Regis strongly encourages the Commission to approve this worthy application for forwarding to the Denver City Council. Sincerely, from Marie Edgar, Lori Simmons, and all the members of Historic Berkeley Regis. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Marie. Could you actually provide us with your address as well for the record?
Sure. 3532 West 39th Avenue.
Thank you. All right, Ellen, you're next.
Hi there, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. My name is Ellen Thomas and I live at 1385 Osceola Street. This is an address that is not very close to this particular property. And I, as someone who doesn't live in the area, I find it equally important to preserve the historical nature of this home. I moved to Denver about 10 years ago, and one of the things that I most liked about it was the variety of the architectural styles throughout the city and seeing those beautiful homes that are 100 years old. I recently did purchase my own old home, and I can say that it is one of the most important things to me in order to preserve that for future generations. I also want to say that I'm not against development either. And as other people have made the very eloquent points, that there are other properties, other types of lots that are less significant historically that could be used to achieve this developer's goals. And that is what I would advocate for, in addition to the fact that I think it is the right thing to do to preserve this property. I don't think that Denver as a whole, I wouldn't want our city to favor predatory capitalism rather than historical integrity. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Keith, you are next.
Hi, Keith Pryor. I am the chair of the Curtis Park Neighborhood Design Review. as well as the Welton Street Cultural Historic District, and I am not representing either of those today. I'm just speaking on behalf of myself. So this is an amazing piece of architecture, and it does have a great history, and it also does meet the criteria as outlined by staff. And so given that, I do ask the commission to follow the guidelines and recommend approval for this as a historic structure. One of the things that I think we have to look for in balancing this is it's not an if and or other. We have a great amount of land, especially in Arapahoe Square, adjacent to the Curtis Park Historic District, as well as along Colfax, along a lot of major areas, Golden Triangle, that have just an overabundance of parking lots that are underdeveloped and not currently being utilized to their full potential. We have a lot of non-historic, underutilized properties in this area along 17th that are vacant. We have a lot of parking lots at the hospital district in this area that just sit empty because there are no cars in them. If we were in a true housing crisis, and we would want to be tearing down structures that actually could be reused or repurposed, I would be, something more inclined to say that might be a possibility. But given the amount of surrounding space within this property, even in a 1 mile zone, a circle, and you just look at how many underutilized parking lots that can be developed, why is it that we're tearing this structure down when we can accommodate the current needs and growth in other means? And so let's preserve our history in this case. This does meet the criteria. It's a beautiful home, and it can be reused and repurposed appropriately given the context. We can build multi-unit housing adjacent to it or in other areas adjoining in this 1 mile radius of this building on a parking lot that is currently underserved. So I do ask you to recommend to council that this be preserved for history. And I thank you for your time and support today.
Thank you, Keith. And could you provide your address?
Sure, it's 2418 Champa Street, Denver, 80205.
Thanks. Okay, it looks like Andrea is up next, and go ahead. Andrea, I know that you serve in official capacity, official capacity with Historic Denver, who was part of the applicant team. So if you have comments that are your own personal comments as opposed to Historic Denver's comments, please feel free to share them. But unfortunately, because you're a part of the applicant, because Historic Denver is part of the applicant team, it can't be official Historic Denver comments.
Okay, in that case, I'll speak on my own behalf personally. As a former member of Denver Community Planning and Development myself, I'll just reinforce that we know that the people of Denver believe that historic assets are a key ingredient of any complete neighborhood, just like parks, streets, and schools. That belief was codified in 2019 in Blueprint Denver, which calls for complete neighborhoods that continually evolve while retaining the authentic places that make them special. And I think this is a very special property. It obviously is in very good condition. And I think there are creative solutions to be found for preserving and adaptively reusing it. Thank you.
Thanks. You didn't say your name or address officially, so could you do that?
Andrea Burns, 2259 South Humboldt Street.
Thank you. All right, Brendan, you are up next.
Hi, my name is Brennan Katie, and I live at 2046 Vine Street. I've been a resident of City Park West since 2015. Since moving to the neighborhood, I've gotten married, and we've started a family in our house. One of the main reasons that attracted us to this area is the historical charm of the neighborhood. It feels like there are fewer areas within Denver that are still retain its historic charm going back over 100 years. And this is something we value greatly. I know amongst my neighbors, this is something that's also reflected as a reason why people live here, in addition to, you know, proximity to downtown and the overall quality and vibrancy of life here. Just when I personally just go on walks, whether it's going to the Carl Madison Center or et cetera, just going down to Colfax, I frequently go down that street on Gaylord, and I'm always struck by the diversity of homes and architecture on that street. And I'd just like to echo some of the previous participants in saying that it feels like there are much more underutilized areas within our within City Park West. So I don't understand why, you know, things with such rich architectural and, you know, Denver history are targeted for redevelopment when there are other areas that seem like better candidates. So I support the preservation of this, and I thank you for your time.
Great. Stephen Pacheco is next, as opposed to Steve H., who is after that.
Hello, can you hear me? Hello?
Hi, yes.
Okay. My name is Stephen Pacheco. I own the property at 1740 Gaylord Street, and I want to see the preservation of this house. We moved to this block specifically because of the historical homes, and to see this home at risk of demolition is unacceptable. That is all I have to say. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right, Steve H. is next, and we'll need your last name as well.
Okay,
There you go.
You can hear me?
Yeah.
Great. My name is Steve Heggie. I represent the ownership at 1855 Gaylord Street. The ownership and development group for the Edge condominiums at City Park wish to go on record in support of the findings and suggested motions as stated in the letter written to the commission by Kara Hahn, Landmark Planning and Regulatory Supervisor, on February 28, 2023. We're located just 1/2 block from the subject site of the hearing. The Edge condominiums community was built in 2014. A principal reason this site was selected for redevelopment was the surrounding area's medium to lower scale density and beautiful residential settings. Unlike the subject property of this hearing, the buildings demolished for the development of the Edge were dilapidated and met all the requirements for repurposing and reuse. One of the few existing landmark designated properties in the area is located just 300 feet from the Edge. The mix of residential housing and business properties in the neighborhood were at that time relatively low density or single units, resulting in a lovely City Park residential business retail environment. Since then, a number of recent larger scale multifamily units have been built. The City Park neighborhood has often been noted and recognized as one of the best neighborhoods in Denver. This recognition was in no small part due to the myriad of historical and architecturally significant properties that lay within its boundary. The history and reputation deserves to be maintained. As stated in the Landmark Preservation Commission letter, the demolition of yet another one of Denver's finest historic homes, especially a structure that is so comprehensive or that so comprehensively meets and exceeds the designation criteria, would diminish the character and charm of one of Denver's finest. Please approve the proposed landmark designation for 1741 Gaylord Street, and thank you for the time you have allotted us on this important commission discussion.
Thank you. Yeah, so it's 1855 Gaylord Street. Okay, the last one we have right now is Lori. You're welcome to unmute as soon as Taylor does her thing. Go.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioners. My name is Lori Rose Kepros. I am the homeowner at 1725 North Marion Street, which is in City Park West and in District 9. The property meets landmark criteria. It's also 2 blocks off of City Park and contributes to City Park's context. I have lived in and around Denver since 1984, and I worry in recent years that the legitimate conversation about Denver's affordable housing crisis is creating a false choice. That because there is a shortage for some housing, Denver is abdicating all decision-making to developers. Developers are important. They serve major functions in solving some of our problems. But it also means that now is the time for the people who value Denver's history and identity to stand up and preserve it. Because if not now, when nobody wants to live here, we don't have these conversations. This is the time when the decisions you make are paramount, and they can't be fixed later if you make the wrong decision. The housing shortage is a real problem. I'm an attorney who has represented poor people for more than 25 years, so I take it very seriously. But it's also a problem that is and should be addressed in a variety of ways. To the point made by one of the earlier commentators, I live in a historic home, and across the street from me is an empty parking lot, which I'm sure can and will be developed in the near future. But we also have a shortage of 120-year-old Dutch colonial revival mansions that were at their time considered one of the 25 most beautiful homes in the city of Denver. And if that is not preserved now, nobody can replace it later. Landmarking this building does not foreclose development. It just ensures that it is done in a conscientious manner that meets the multiple needs of the residents of Denver. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right, so that's the last hand raise we're seeing via Zoom or by phone, essentially. Correct. So if there's anyone else who wants to make a public comment, now's the time to hit the hand raise button or to raise your hand. Okay. All right. So with that, we've heard from everyone in attendance who wish to speak, so I'll go ahead and close the public hearing. And I think there's probably some recap that needs to be done, some questions. Anne, you had a question for landmark staff, right? Did you want to ask that, Kira?
Yes, I just wondered if you could comment on the circumstances of the expansion of the
Discover Denver.
Yes, exactly. Discover Denver Center, sort of what were the circumstances of it?
Yes, so Discover Denver is a survey of all of our different neighborhoods. We're going around the city. We don't re-survey buildings that are already landmarked. Partnership between us and Historic Denver. So we're looking at all the buildings in the neighborhood. We look at them primarily architecturally. So there were 18 buildings in the particular neighborhood that were listed in some way, local, state, or national register. So those were the 18 buildings that were already listed at the time of the survey that was done. We are going in then and looking and determining, we write a survey report, which actually for us as staff is the most valuable part that comes out of this. Then the volunteers look at the buildings and basically look at it for architectural value. Could it contribute to a district? Does it have architectural character enough of a style to be significant for its architecture? Then a small percentage is reviewed for the enhanced level. How that choice is made is based on the neighborhood, what other neighborhoods are in. We do phases for our grant. So each phase typically has about 3 neighborhoods. They'll vary. We try to do them geographically throughout the city, culturally, demographically, and age of buildings. So when you're in a particular phase, you could be in Virginia Village and City Park West. or in Westwood and in another neighborhood. So you try to like do that. So within the grant, we have to survey a particular percentage of buildings. And this one, it was 7%. And so it's chosen amongst all of the other neighborhoods that we're looking in that phase.
At the enhanced level.
At the enhanced level, yeah. So all of them get looked at architecturally. Go out there and record all the details. Then at the enhanced level, how much time are we going to spend researching something? There's a small percentage that are looked at. It is not it should never be looked at as comprehensively. These are historic and these aren't. It is just looked at like, we're out in the field and people will be like, hey, I think there's a great story about this house. They used to have ghosts. Go research that. Go research this. I heard about this great story of this, lawyer who used to live here. Go research that. So there's things like that we care for the neighborhood. You always have a consultant out in the field, someone, it's consultant or historic Denver who is a trained professional who can provide a list. We never can do enough research for every building that's there. So the 60 some that were looked at for this were, try to do various types of buildings, sizes of buildings, architectural styles, some that are interior lots, some that are corners, some that are brought to us by the community, some that we think look interesting and there might be an interesting story to be told there. But no, the 61 that are listed there in no way, these are historic and all the rest aren't. It's just to help give us a flavor of the neighborhood, to help tell the story and help enhance the survey. Does that help answer your question? And I just want to provide a little more context on it.
That helps answer my question, but then I sort of have another part of it. So we all know in neighborhoods that have a designation. First of all, any home in a neighborhood that's designated, unless it specifically says this is contributing or isn't, we've sort of all been through the process of is it contributing or not. And that this neighborhood is not. But I guess again, I would ask, is there any way that the current owner could have anticipated that one of these homes might wind them in the situation they're in right now?
Yes, it's intentionally asked, and every address is listed, and it tells you, did we find that there was an enhanced survey and it is significant? Does it have architectural merit? Does it have integrity? Or does it need data? This one needed data. So this one, you can look it up by the address and see what does it tell you. If every developer would read every report and look at everything, that would be amazing. 80, 100 pages of reports before he buys every building is quite amazing. And so someone who does that, that's great. But if you're going to take that effort, then give us a call if you're a little confused. But yes, there is an address at the end that tells you this property needs data. It has to be fully data.
And the owner did mention that. He said that it was listed as ND and CDE. So I don't think he actually mentioned what ND means, but that is stated in the report as more data is needed to determine if the property has architectural, historical, and cultural significance. So that gets back to your point that people reviewed it in the field, but didn't have the information to research and find out all the history.
Yeah, we would love stuff like that. Yeah, we would love to do that. There just isn't the time in the world to be able to do that. So what we do is to help share the story, help give depth to the survey report, but it isn't definitive. If it's not on the list, it's not historic.
And I also wanted to clarify one thing. So, Mr. Matheson said that it was $1 million, I believe, grant. And I just looked it up. Now that I'm not sharing the screen, that was a phase 2. This neighborhood was part of phase 2 of our Discover Denver project, currently on phase 4, and wrapping up phase 4. There were 5 areas that were surveyed, and it was a $250,000 grant. So this is approximately $50,000 for this neighborhood in theory. I don't know how it's all broken down exactly, but it wasn't $1 million. It wasn't even $250,000. It was a portion of $250,000 for that case.
So maybe the 1.5 or whatever he mentioned would be like in a total.
I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. I also just want to make sure, the owner was talking about how the city of Denver, the city of Denver's involvement is just one piece for Discover Denver. Historic Denver, or sorry,
Yeah. So historic Denver leads the effort. We we are a partner with them. We are a funding partner, so we provide the match for the State Historical Fund grant. So it's a 75-25% match. So we as the city provide typically the 25% match. Historic Denver has the director of it, Beth Damon is the director of Discover Denver. And then we as the city, depending on the phase, sometimes are more involved with staff, sometimes less, given our workload. We've been a little bit less more recently. We're more involved in this, in the phase, but we're more or less involved. Sometimes we review the reports. We always provide comments on that. We are involved in conversations. Jen is currently the staff member who works with that from the city side. But we also have a lot of GIS. Time is where a lot of our work comes in. So like our GIS staff providing a lot of data, talking to History Colorado to get their Compass data. Compass is History Colorado's database for historic resources. So the city provides a lot of support in that way, but it's primarily run by Historic Denver.
Quick follow-up question to that, is it Landmark staff that are the part of City of Denver that is involved with this, the different entities? Okay.
And CPD staff being the GIS team.
Got it.
So, yeah, so it's Landmark and then our GIS arm in CPD.
And our comms team, it really helps with us getting the word out, doing a lot of interviews, that kind of stuff. So we have a comms team that works as well. So it's those parts of the city that.
I have a question about GIS database. After Discover Denver does its survey in the area, are the properties that are considered potential for designation based on architectural merit alone, is that flagged in any way on the GIS database?
So then we get the GIS data from History Colorado. We work with it, and then there's a form for every building. Sometimes it's just architectural details. Sometimes if it's the enhanced form, it has the history included in it. And it will say, all of the forms will say, is there architectural significance? If it's had the research, it will say, then here's what else we think is significant for that. Those forms are then sent back to History Colorado as part of the grant, and then eventually will go through their information management program, which will then upload them so they will be available for everyone else. That InfoMan is what it's called, is very backed up and has just like too much work and not enough people. So a lot of the data hasn't been re-uploaded to Compass. I realize that's in the weeds kind of thing, but it will eventually be made public. It just hasn't until they can get their stuff up.
And also, Beth and I are working very closely with the GIS team that with DPD to try to work on an outward facing map. So we want to get all of this stuff out there and in the public but we want it to be user friendly and pretty and all that stuff. If we could just do a data dump and have it, and people would not know what to do with it. And so we're trying to beautify it, and hopefully we will have that done this year for much of the cities surveyed.
So right now, which we surveyed for?
Yeah, we're 25% of the
I think that Compass was more useful before they changed the software.
Well, so that was a deep dive into Discover Denver. I think we can, if everyone's comfortable with that, let's close that conversation so we can move forward and actually assess the application. Are there any other questions for staff before we move into deliberation? No. Okay.
I think to start deliberation though, is it fair to address the Discover Denver question?
I think before we do that, we never got an introduction because you came in late. But you've been here for like pretty much all of us. So
Like I told a friend.
You did.
Apologies there. I'm a preservation project manager nominated by the Denver Planning.
Thank you, Graham.
And I guess I'd maybe kick off the deliberation just with the Discover Denver. Oh, go ahead, Jen.
Mr. Ransom has a question that I think you would change to that.
Okay. We've moved into deliberation, so it's not really like an open Q&A anymore.
I wanted to cover Denver things that you were gonna ask me about as well when I was at the table. If I can't address it, that's fine, but I just wanted, I think something was not.
I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. I just want to ask a question. Thank you.
Thanks. Go ahead, Graham.
I think that an important distinction is that Discover Denver is a shared effort. It's an element that's totally separate from the city and county of Denver's preservation ordinance and our purview here today. And I think that in light of how heavily it was referenced, it's a great tool. There's a lot.
Make sure to project.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It's a great tool, but ultimately it can't really inform our decision here to, any property in the city county of Denver is eligible for this process of heritage. And so I just think for everybody, both on the phone, focused a lot on an important and helpful tool, but a very obscure part of what is the bigger part of, I think, the commission's conversation today. So I just wanted to say that up front because it seemed like there were a lot of ways.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. And I see a lot of nothing heads. So I think maybe we can close that discussion. And I think, it's great that the owner had reviewed that. And I think that it was clear that, it was not indicated whether it could be landmarks or not in the report because they needed more data. So there was nothing indicating that it was not significant.
It's in fact used as an example of a significant type.
Yeah.
The photo of the top. So, yeah, we dwelt a lot on that. I think there's a lot more time.
Thank you for clarifying that. Great. So with that, let's open it up. What did everybody think about the application? And we heard a lot of comments, and all of those comments are great to hear. We're here just to determine whether we think it meets the criteria that was outlined in the application, and it does need to meet 3 out of 10 criteria. So they argued the 3. What does everybody think about it?
I'll kick it off by saying I'm never quite sure how much to belabor all the points, but I think the application and the staff report summary of the application be a clear argument for each of the 3 criteria that's claiming as significant for this property. I think it's an exceptional example of Dutch colonial revival style. Gove and Walsh are an established, prominent architectural firm. There's very few residential examples of their work. This is an excellent example of that work. And then finally, the people that it's been associated with since its construction, I think the application made a good argument and gave important context to the business aspects of these businessmen who were successful building a prominent home in an up-and-coming neighborhood, how their business thrives over a number of years in Denver, and then the interim second owner, one of the second owners, and his role in politics and business as well. I would also just want to hone in a little bit more on Edith Berger in that I think it's important to recognize that very few, there is one of the reasons why women aren't better represented in historic preservation and historic buildings is that so much of their work was volunteer work. This is probably the only building that is associated with Edith Berger and her work with Children's Hospital. The hospital itself has undergone major revisions, but I'm also sure she did not have an office at that building. She was working most likely, most probably out of her home. This home is representative of her work in that respect. So I just wanted to emphasize that and add it to the conversation. But I think the building has excellent integrity, and the context that's been presented kind of ties all of this together. So I think this is a prime candidate for designation.
Madam Chair, I actually agree with all the points that Erica made, but I specifically did want to talk about Edith Berger for a moment because I think it's imperative to something about new discovery or needing to find research on the situations. It's not on the website a lot of times, and I just I did want to emphasize that. I mean, I had no idea Liza Hamilton started until I saw it. And how cool is that? And so we have, right here. That makes it
I'd like to run down some bullet points from both the online and the present points made, mostly in the context of what we are here to do. Yes, Edith Berger, absolutely significant. In fact, you don't even need the grocery store. She would be sufficient by herself to designate this, to meet the requirement of a significant person. Next, we heard the word, it's a beautiful home. Beautiful is not in our context. Sorry, but it's not. On the other hand, the aesthetics of the neighborhood certainly are. It's why we are here to help preserve that which made us want to live here. And so just to make sure that the beauty part of it is not germane. I want to thank the owner for the exhaustive research, and a lot of it, of course, was due to me too, and forensic analysis of all of the numbers. But nowhere in our mandate is a fixed number of examples of any particular architecture mandated. The object here amongst us is to say the ones that qualify, and I think, as has been said, the house qualifies absolutely. I think it's generous on the part of the applicant that they did not include the entire lot, but just the building. We see where their focus is. And if we can preserve the building and other uses can be found for the land around it, go for it. Silly Shriner picture, I already said in August what that meant. Social significance back then, if you were a member of the Denver Country Club, if you were a potentate with the Shriners or whatever, that's the equivalent of having 100,000 followers on Facebook. So when you keep things in context, these were significant people. They were involved. The house qualifies, and I can certainly endorse the application.
I agree. I mean, when I looked at this, I looked at the present owner's rebuttal to the criteria. And I had no question that the building was architecturally significant or that the architects associated with its design was significant. There was an argument that since Gove didn't design it personally, it shouldn't be significant. Well, if that's the criteria, no building moving forward is ever going to be designated because architecture firms don't work that way now, and they didn't work that way at times back then. It was the significance of the owners and occupants that I kind of looked at the material that was submitted to try to put it in the context of the time that you alluded to. There was a statement saying that $50,000 in founding capital for the bank was very small. Well, there were 300 and some odd banks that were listed as existing, and that was the average capitalization of banks at that time, which is significantly more today. We do the math, and then it really has to do with how are these people seen in society at the time. You can't compare them to Jay Jabs or Adele Arakawa or John Elway or whoever. I mean, it's a different situation. I think, George, you hit the point very correctly. Is membership in social organizations at that time was a big deal, including social organizations that don't even exist anymore.
Yeah, well, that was because a lot of people didn't get it.
So I agree that the application meets all three criteria and deserves recognition.
Thank you.
Sounds like great consensus. Any other comments?
I mean, I guess just one kind of last comment, or one comment for me, in addition to agreeing things that the other commissioners have said. I think a lot of conversation was brought up around affordable housing, and just that is, something that I'm sure we're all concerned about, but it's not our mandate as commissioners to consider that. That would be more in the realm of city council, I imagine.
Yeah, that's a good comment. I'd also just say that, Gary, I looked at it kind of the same way you did, where I was trying to then refute, like, are there any of these and any of the owners' information that they submitted that that I could really find not, justifying the criteria. And I agree, it's like a slam dunk, it's architecturally significant. The architect is a recognized, architect. And yeah, that's, the documentation is not there to prove whether Gov, did or did not work on it. And it's, yeah, you put it perfectly. I won't reword that. But
their firm was rather small and it didn't matter. It was a collaborative work.
yeah. And I think, they mentioned that the Colorado Architects biographical sketch that History Colorado has for, it didn't list this property. A lot of those properties are listed, based on what was already designated, like based on state and national registers. This is not on a state or national register. So it's not an exhaustive list of every single building that was done. And I think that the fact that most of their work was, or most of the work that's still existing is commercial, and that this is one of the last ones we know of that's residential just makes it even more significant. So, but yeah, I agree. I really was digging into, are the people associated with it significant? And I think that there's just enough evidence that there's 3 different people too, and, referenced in multiple different arenas. I think there's no doubt in my mind that it meets that criteria. I would just like to address, some staff brought it up. I would agree with the period of significance, and it would be highly unusual for us to have something go through 2021, especially since the areas of significance are all really dating back towards its original construction. So I would say that I would support a period of significance change as staff recommends from 1903 to 1927.
I would agree. I'd like to just add that I know Judy's house, I think it was extended because of Judy's house, and obviously that wasn't part of the criteria that we were considering, which is why it's appropriate to change that period of significance. I just want to recognize that I understand that more recent significance of that organization. This is one of the reasons why we are tasked with really looking at older, 30 years or older and less, proven exceptional, because we have more of a period of time in which to kind of gain some objectivity as to true impact or true significance. So while it may be significant for today, it's not relevant as to this application. Can I also just add, I know we all feel the same way, but I think it's important to say that I want to thank everyone who spoke today, public commenters, applicants, the owner. I think it's important to hear from all of you, so thank you for your time.
Yeah, very much. Thank you. And a couple other things. One of the public comments mentioned, it's interesting, there are interior photos. So this landmark designation for the city does not have purview over the interior. So that is why we don't really review the interior. So I just thought I'd mention that. And as well, we do not have the ability to designate this property. So what we are going to do is, recommend city council approve it based on our assessment that it meets the criteria. So I just wanted to make that clear that this is not the final step. So your voices can continue to be heard.
I can also, Kara.
I was going to say, I realized in the motion, I did not put in the modification of the period of significance. So if you do the motion, you can add the modified period of significance. 27, that was my error. I realized I recommended it, but then to agree to your motion.
I also just wanted to bring up for a bit of context that, this commission, as recently as I think a few meetings ago, decided not to forward an application for a very beautiful 1920s craftsman bungalow, but that we felt just didn't meet 3D criteria. So it's not that there's a sort of rubber stamp for anything that, comes to us. I think we take this all very seriously and listen to all voices. So.
Yeah, it's difficult to meet 3 criteria for an individual property. It's much easier to have a district where you have more context. So that's a good point. All right, well, it sounds like we're all in agreement, and keep in mind Kara's comments about adding the period of significance change. Would someone like to make the motion?
I can make the motion. Madam Chair, I move to recommend approval and forward to City Council the landmark designation of 1741 Gaylord Street. Application number 2023L-002, based on the landmark ordinance criteria B, C, and D, citing as finding of fact for the recommendation, the application form, public comment, and testimony in the February 28th staff report, with the condition, or the suggestion, I should say, that the period of significance be amended to 1903 to 1927.
So, thank you, Anne, for the motion, and George for seconding. If there's no further discussion on the motion, I'll call the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? All right, the motion passes unanimously, and this will move forward to City Council. Everybody? And I'm just going to pause for a minute as people clear out so that it's 3 o'clock. Oh, yeah, maybe we'll do a quick bathroom break. So everyone on the line for design review projects, you could just hold on. We'll take a quick break. I guess. Cool. All right. Thanks, everybody, for your patience. We're back, and we'll go ahead and start the design review process now. So the process is up on the screen. Excuse me. I'll go ahead and announce the project. Staff will introduce the application, provide their recommendation, and then we'll hear from the applicant. The applicant will have up to 10 minutes to present, and then we'll open it up for public comment. Excuse me. Eating and have a cough right now. Yeah. The public comment period for design review projects is 2 minutes per person, unlike the hearing we just had. So a little bit different. Otherwise, it's the same process we just went through. And after hearing from the public, we'll go ahead and move into deliberation vote. The first project is 2023-COA-056 at 3426 Elliott Street.
Thank you. So this is a phase 2 tandem house proposal for 3426 Elliott Street, which is located in the Potter Highlands Historic District. Phase 1 was approved in January 10th of this year. And here at the top is a photo of the existing non-contributing structure that will remain at the front of the lot. On the right are photos of the lot where the new structure will be sited. This will be along the alley. At the bottom of the screen is the site plan for the zone lot with the primary structure at the front of the lot and the new tandem house behind it. The new tandem house is approximately 36 feet wide and is proposed to be 2 stories with an attached 2-car garage facing the alley. A new concrete walk from the front sidewalk also leads to the new front porch. So here we have the front facade elevation here on the left, showing a simple traditional style with overlaid hip roof design. The home will have a 1-story partial width porch with a shed roof and a wood 3/4 light door and vertical porch railing. The cladding for the new structure is a James Hardie smooth horizontal fiber cement board with a 4-inch reveal. At the south elevation on the right, you can see the hip roof dormer and in-wall dormer above the garage have been removed from the design and simplified by the applicant. I've included the phase 1 approval at the bottom right, just to show for reference for change. Staff feels the design still meets the design guidelines and has no issues. The Additionally, during review, it's found that the total height has been changed from the phase one approved plan, which was approved at 25 feet 10 inches to 27 feet in this application. Staff would recommend the height be changed back to that 25 feet 10 inch height as originally approved by the phase one approval. So here we can see the rear elevation for the new structure. And you can see the proposed paired 1/1 windows at the first and second floor. Roofing will be black asphalt shingles in the traditional pattern. All windows are proposed to be aluminum clad wood. The north elevation also features these paired windows as well as sliding doors from the dining area with side lights leading out to a small concrete patio. And then here are some of the details that were found in the application. You can see the window schedule as well as the required 2-inch inset for windows and the proposed trim around the windows structure. And then here is the materials page for the house. The structure uses a simple combination of materials with the lap siding, asphalt single roofing, and the aluminum clad wood windows on the structure. Therefore, staff feels that it fits with the context of the district. Then finally, these are the isometric views of the tandem house design. The proposed infill structure design details are characteristic of the district and are similar to historic proportions. Therefore, staff is recommending approval with the condition that the maximum height be changed back to the 25 feet 10 inches to match the phase one approved height. Crystal. Yes, question.
The question, why are you recommending change height actually earlier submittal? Just because it was earlier submitted?
Partially, but also I felt like from what I heard of that conversation then, some of the commissioners had concerns about the two-story structure's height, being the height of the story structure. So it seems like you guys wanted it to be not as tall behind this, but if you feel that it's appropriate, just remove that condition.
I have another question,
Sure.
which is, does, in its revised version, does this require, does it break the bulk plane? Is it outside the bulk plane? Because it's a little hard, it says maximum height, I'm assuming that's the bulk plane.
Yeah, I think it does. Here, just
Okay, and so there's sort of two parts to this question. Previously, it looks like it's above the bulk plane by 3 feet. So even in the previous version, it was still above the bulk plane. And is that correct? And do we know where the extra height came in? I mean, did the roof get bigger or the second floor got higher?
I believe that's the question for that.
Okay. So at what point does it no longer, does it no longer make the phase one requirement? In other words, you know, if they, yeah. I mean, the question I'm asking is because we don't know where the height came in, and maybe the applicant can tell us, but it's not the same phase one. So are we reviewing phase one and phase two together?
The adjustment was very new, so it still meets the intent of phase one, which is the massive form. The height is slightly different, and that's why I pointed it out for you to discuss. But it still overall looks like the original design. It matches.
Okay, and then also in terms of the bulk plane adjustment, is that something that we need to address, or we can just let the applicant go to?
Yeah, they're requesting like a.
They didn't request one,
They didn't request-
so,
Great.
I did do it, but it may be something they need, so we'll have to. And if so, I can come back to that if they request it from us.
Okay.
So we should be clear today, if they need that, and we're not comfortable giving them.
Sheet A7 has a full bulk plane detail into deliberation.
Could you say that again? I couldn't hear that.
Sheet A7 has a
Yes.
full bulk plane detail.
That's what, yeah.
This is the maximum height part of the bulk plane, or are they two separate issues?
Separate.
So in that case, there's a slight bulk plane encroachment, but a larger maximum height encroachment. According to the.
Oh. I see what
which the earlier proposal also exceeded the maximum height.
It's because the maximum height for the lot steps down as it goes back towards the rear of the lot. Which is common for tandem houses, accessory dwelling units, other structures back there.
I guess the question for staff related to this is that something that staff considered in their review?
The current height or the whole height?
Well, with regards to the height in general being taller than the maximum height for the rear, 35%.
I think in the original design, they looked at the height of the area, and so the original.
Related.
Yeah, it looks like it was appropriate for the area, and because you guys approved it.
Yeah.
My indication, we felt it was also okay for the area,
Okay.
but now that it's taller, then it may feel different. Let's talk to them.
Great, thank you very much. All right, is the applicant present? Please remove them.
Probably that one, right? Yeah.
Great. Okay. Okay, this. Come on, sorry, not the applicant, me. Come on, me.
All right, when you're ready, I believe you can unmute yourself. And please start with your name and address for the record. You have up to 10 minutes.
Okay. My name is Dean Ritchie. I'm the architect on the project. My address is 5180 Vallejo Street. And I think I'll probably just tackle the whole height issue here. And a lot of it is semantics, and probably I wasn't as clear as I should have been. The house submitted in phase 2 is actually 5 inches taller than the house submitted in phase 1. When you just look at the elevations, the biggest difference is accounting for, on our construction documents, where we're measuring from. The reason it seems to be 14 inches taller is that dimension base plane, which is 22 feet in front of this house and 9 inches lower than the house. So it's gotten a little bit bigger, but not as much as it seems. Happy to sort of address that however you see fit. It's all, attic. It doesn't get us anything. It was really just about context. The steeper pitch roofs does kind of create an issue. And we've got the 2 heights, height in the front, which is about the front, maybe 15% of the house is in the front, 65% of the lot, and then the height in the rear is, so it's not quite as tall in the rear based on the zoning measurements, but that's where the height came from. It was the original one we measured from the adjacent grade to the roof peak. Now we're measuring from the base plane 20 feet in front of the house or 50 feet in front of the house. So that was kind of the height issue. I think that we don't have a ton to really add to the description of the house. We've got a few of these now, tandems in historic districts. We've done them with the new house in the front. We've done them with the new house in the rear, but on a corner, so it has street frontage. On these ones, with these two, where it's an internal lot and the house in the rear, we just try to really keep the house as simple as possible. We don't want, so that's why the dormer went away. It seemed a little fussy back there. We don't want the rear house to compete with anything on the street. And it is back about 90 feet from the street. So we just wanted a house that was okay as background. I mean, that's sort of what we kind of feel it should be. So that was kind of how we got to where we were at. Thanks for your time.
Great, thank you. Are there any additional questions? So, I actually have one. So we were talking about whether this would need a recommendation for like an administrative adjustment or something like that to that effect. Dean, could you speak to that? Were you looking to pursue that, since it does appear as though it doesn't meet zoning right now?
Exactly, yeah. Yes, we would look for your support with zoning on the AA.
Okay, and so that would be for a 3-foot height encroachment. Is that right?
And I think maybe less than a foot, a small bulk plane. I think there's a small bulk plane encroachment as well.
Oh, yeah, on the side. Okay. Okay. And you mentioned that it increased in height about 5 inches from the phase 1, but you said that was just attic space. So is it easy to lower it? Or, I mean, it looks to me like if you lower it, you're going to have to change the slope of the roof. Is that right?
Yeah, so it is 5 inches taller, or the elevation is 5 inches taller than what it was in phase 1. It's honestly, it's silly stuff. It's going from using pre-cut studs, which adds 1 1/8 inches per floor. So, but we could absolutely, probably less than 1/4 inch per foot on the slope, which I don't think would even be noticeable, would bring it back to the original height of the phase 1 approval.
Thank you. Any other questions about the application? Great, thanks for your time. Is there anyone on the line or in person who would like to make a public comment on this project?
Don't have anyone by phone anymore, just so we didn't know anyway, it's just us. But I'm not seeing any hands raised. Great. So, okay. And no one in the room is saying yes.
Yeah, so any recap, Crystal?
No, I just didn't see that they were asking for a full plane adjustment, so my apologies. So it sounds like height and full plane. If you're comfortable with that, and if you're not, I'll say that. And they can always adjust this one. It's up to you.
And from your small opinion, based on the surrounding context, you'd be comfortable with that, or?
Yes, there were some shorter ones on the block, but as he had mentioned, there are a lot of steep pitch roofs in this area, and I don't think a foot or two either way. It's already taller than the 1-story house, so it would be comfortable.
Okay. Great. Let's move into deliberation. What did everybody think about the phase 2 submission? And let's just start with the height, since we're not going to that happen a lot.
Asking
That changes?
that you get a larger dimension in phase 2 than you approved in phase 1.
It happens a lot once it goes from you all to us for permitting. Yeah, it's pretty, 5 inches is negligible.
Or
Yeah.
It's almost a rounding area with sidewalk.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what he was mentioning, that 1 1/8 inch per floor gets added once he started detailing.
So the 1/4 inch per foot, so okay.
So it sounds like
I would
most
concur
people
with
are
that, but
comfortable with the 5 inch difference.
Yes.
If they'll understand, it looks like more because he's now dimensioning from the baseline, which he's got to do for something. So,
And I definitely think the steeper roof is more appropriate.
yeah. So that would be my one thing is that, I mean, I don't have a problem with it, but sometimes I have a problem with us recommending like adjustments when I think there's like there are other ways. Yeah, he doesn't have to have a 2-story structure. He doesn't have to,
Right.
Maybe it's not sloped to the back, but that kind of opens up a big can of worms. And I would agree that changing the slope drastically of the roof to adjust would not be the way to make this more appropriate or compatible with the district. So I guess for that reason, I support the adjustment, but I do kind of have some heartburn about,
Doing it this way.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes we see these where it's like so clear. I don't know, like I could think of examples in Curtis Park where it's an Italianate, it's an infill that's an Italianate, and so it pierces the bulk plane because of the, square nature and the flat roof. And that's like a clear reason to, recommend an adjustment because that's an appropriate form in that district and it would need to be that scale in order to meet it. Whereas in this one, I'm like, well, I mean, this could be anything back here, any form, I don't know. But it does fit within the context, so I'll support it, but I do.
Well, the reason I asked the question in the first place was I noticed that the dormer disappeared. And I think that's improved because it makes the house simpler. And so I was wondering if the roof height was a factor in making that dormer disappear.
Yeah.
And I don't have a problem with it being 5 inches taller. I guess these days you can make a truss at any roof pitch you want. So if it's not 8/12, it could be 7 3/4, 12. But I don't know that and I don't know that it'll make a big difference, but I don't have a problem with the encroachment, either on the height or the thing.
I think there's a fair argument to be made that it, looking at the south elevation, or the north elevation, I guess, where the bulk plane or the maximum height drops down, that it would actually be a pretty significant reduction in the pitch of the roof.
Yeah.
And so you'd have to start really having the roof cut into where windows are, the whole different design thing there. So, and then I think it would be less compatible if it didn't have something in the realm of that 8/12 pitch. Yeah, I support it.
Anything besides the height that anyone wants to discuss? Looks like the design details meet our guidelines. Everyone in agreement with staff's recommendation. Great. And who would like to make a motion?
I just have one question. Are we going to recommend?
Oh, yes. Thank you.
And I took a quick note on that so I can make the notion.
Do you have the section of the zoning code?
Yeah, I grabbed it from another Thank you for the praise.
5 stars later.
All right. I move to approve application number 2023-COA-056 for the design details of the proposed tandem house structure at 3426 Elliott Street as per presented testimony, submitted documentation, guidelines 4.3, 4.5, 4.7, 4.8, the Potter Highlands character defining features, presented testimony, submitted documentation, and information provided in the staff report. I also move to recommend an administrative adjustment for height and bulk plane per section 12.4.5.3 of the Denver zoning code, finding that conformance to the requirements of the zoning code would have an adverse impact on the historic district.
Thanks, Larry.
I gotta remember that one.
All right, thank you, Aaron. For the second, if there's no further discussion, because Larry just killed that motion, then I will call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? All right, motion passes unanimously and design details are approved. The next project up for review today is 2023-COA-057 at 397 Emerson Street. So today we are looking at the demolition of an existing garage and construction of a new garage at 397 Emerson Street, which is in the Alamo Placita Historic District. This is a corner property, as you can see in this aerial image here. The kind of like brown color overlay is the indication of the district, so it's squarely within the middle of the district. And then here you have a street view of the primary structure. The Alamo Placita Historic District has a period of significance of 1889 to 1942.
And this structure is listed as contributing in the designation application material. However, that wasn't formally adopted as part of the designating ordinance. It's not entirely clear to staff when this top was constructed. However, it would not meet our current design guidelines. There goes up. So here you can see the proposed site plan for the new detached garage. It is in a similar location to the existing garage. The existing garage is original to the primary structure. However, garages are not considered contributing in the Alamo Historic District, so it is appropriate for that garage to be demolished. It is inset about 5 feet from the north property line, which is recommended by our design guidelines for corner properties. They not be located right on the sidewalk edge. And the garage door is. So here is the current proposal before the commission today. The commission reviewed a very similar project proposal on December 20th, 2022. However, at that time, the commission expressed concerns over the variety of material cladding on the garage. So the applicant has simplified the general design and material cladding. So we'll have a 3-foot tall brick foundation wall, then it's clad in stucco with a window on the north elevation and windows on the east elevation, and then just a vent on the west elevation. We'll have what I believe is a flat roof with a faux tipped roof appearance with asphalt shingle. The doors and windows are aluminum clad fiberglass composite. So here is the proposal that the commission reviewed in December of 2020. You can see that much more complex material cladding, that overhanging second floor, which the applicant has eliminated from this design. However, some things that have not changed from this current design is the proposed building footprint and height, which is 17 feet. So staff did have concerns over the height of this garage. The Denver zoning code does indicate that garages in the zone district can be 17 feet tall, but they also limit them to 1 story in height. So staff reached out to the applicant because it did appear that this was a 2-story structure. However, the applicant has indicated that the second floor does not actually count as a story. So while it does have a 2-story appearance, according to the applicant, it's still in compliance with the Denver zoning code requirements from 1-story building height. The commission also expressed concern over the proposed garage of 17 feet tall and how it fit in with the surrounding context. So the applicant has provided additional information on what the garage will look like in the surrounding context. So here are the existing conditions. Again, that is the garage that is to be demolished to accommodate the new garage. And here are the proposed alterations. This is kind of it looks like a photometric of the rear addition superimposed on to the new garage, but again, it does generally give the sense of what the garage will look like in the surrounding context, again, at 17 feet height. And then the applicant has provided additional context photos of the surrounding context to show structures in the district. So across the street, there is a Dutch gable alteration to an existing historic garage structure. That is number 1 on the photograph. And then on this same alley, there is a historic carriage house structure that has a flat roof portion on the south side that has a rooftop deck that does measure at 24 feet, 3 inches tall. Again, that is a historic structure. And that is number 2 on these images. And you can see an image of it front and I should say the north, which is the gable portion, and the south, which is the flat roof portion. And then there is a non-historic addition at 3, which is a historic terrace structure that extends from the terrace structure all the way back to the new garage structure. I couldn't find a date on when this addition was constructed. So I would be inclined to say that it predates our current design guidelines. And I'm not sure it's something we would exactly allow today. However, this addition is not visible from the street, but it is in the surrounding context on the same block. So staff are still recommending denial of this proposed garage, as we feel that the design is pulling too heavily from non-historic alterations within the Alamo Placita Historic District, and further creates a sense of non-contributing nature to this site. And we do have concerns over the height still, even though it is within the Denver zoning code requirements. Typically, garage structures within the Alamo Placita Historic District are simple, boxy, one-story in nature structures. There are a few historic carriage houses scattered throughout the district, and they are essentially grandfathered into the district, but this neighborhood doesn't allow for accessory dwelling units in the majority of the district. There is a small portion on the west side of the district that does allow for ADUs. So you really can't have the accessory dwelling unit form in here, so it wouldn't really blend in because that's not allowed here in the zone district. We just feel that it is not contextual to the historic garages in the surrounding context, and also some of the newer garages in the surrounding context, which are still simple one-story or simple structures. So at this time, we are recommending denial of this project.
Any questions for staff? And then our Karen person. Okay, great. So let's go ahead and move forward. I have the camera on for you. Make sure you're like. Start with your name to address for the record.
Wayne Hinckley, 17938 West 86th Ave, Arvada, Colorado, contractor.
I'm Sarah Burrow at 6875 West 84th Way, apartment 13, Arvada, Colorado. I am the office manager for the general contractor for this project.
We're here on behalf of the owner. Obviously, she was here, had to leave. Her husband just got cancer. It's kind of bad news, but she had to be gone at a certain time, and we just didn't know that it was going to take that long. But that was a beautiful, 1741 Gaylord, beautiful house. But the meeting took long. So she had to go. She expresses her apologies today. And so we will get into this. What I'd like to say is that, the last, we had a meeting not that long ago about this particular project. The concerns that were brought up were that the height didn't fit into the neighborhood, and the flat roof design, and then that it was too busy. That was one of the comments, too many types of siding. And so we have taken time, got with Laura and Greg and addressed everything. We added the roof facade, so it wasn't just a blank, square building. And then, and made it look, the look that was done will look very similar to the house. We believe it's going to be a very good addition to the neighborhood. If you look at, I don't know how to, do you know how to do all this? Okay, can we move some of these?
I can do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you go back to the alley?
This one? Yeah.
Okay, this one right here. So,
So one is the one across the street, and then two
okay.
is just out.
And we have them from you, the ones from your packet too.
Do have ours as well.
Okay.
This is this one.
Oh, that's it.
It's a very,
Okay.
second one.
All right, this Maybe I need glasses. I couldn't see that well.
Look, there you go.
Okay, so the garage right there, the first one you see with the white door, that's the garage right there that we want to take down. It's a flat roof garage, very common to the area. There's nothing historically aesthetic about that, in my opinion. I mean, after looking at Gaylord, I'm going, wow. I mean, none of these houses, look down the alley, none of this looks like any kind of historic area whatsoever. And then, and we don't, notice 3 buildings right there that are much taller than what we're asking. I believe they're all, let me look down. Okay, on that picture right there, the height is 24.3. The second picture, I'm sorry, 24.3 of the one down there. It's at what, 3 houses up. Okay. Now there's one that you don't have a picture of. The fourth one is 23.1. 24.3. Oh no, that's the.
This is the one that they can see right there.
That's.
They have all your materials in front of them, so just because it's not included in the presentation, doesn't mean that they don't have it available to them.
So anyway, the one with the deck on it, that's 24.3, a pretty tall flat building to begin with. And then they added the deck on top of that. Then farther down, which is number 3, it looks like, that's 23.1. Now, if you go back to number 1, that building is number 1.
23 feet, 2 inches, right?
23.2. So we're talking about a max of 17. And there's no question. I mean, if you look at that neighborhood right there, look at that edge of the alley, what we're proposing is going to improve the look of this entire neighborhood. And what we're doing is going to match the existing house. Now, whether or not it fits into, she said maybe it wouldn't fit into our criteria right now. It is what it is, and so we're making it look the same. And it's going to be a nice looking building.
On the primary structure itself, that's what we were, attempting to do with the brick and the stucco, so that it does actually match the primary structure.
They tried to do that across the street back there on photo number 1. They tried to make that barn style garage match up. However, they came a lot closer to the existing height of the primary. We're well below that. About 7 feet approximately below the primary height.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Are there any questions for the applicant?
I'm sorry.
Your time.
We did change all the siding. One of the issues brought up was the amount of siding materials. So we've limited to 2, and that exactly matches the house also, just the brick and stuff.
Any questions for the applicant?
There's just one question. Is there a reason why the roof is kind of asymmetrical on the alley facing side? Got like an overhang, it looks like, on the south side, and no overhang.
Because of the bowl plane, because we did not want to infringe on the bowl plane, and so we started the garage back in the existing location. And because of that, because of the bowl plane coming right through there, that's where we started the point.
Recently about overhang, being able to encroach into the bulk plane, so there's a possibility there will be an overhang that could be changed, but we didn't come up with that, so that's why there's no.
That's true. In the last couple of weeks, we did roll the truth into the bulk plane with an overhang, but at the time we didn't know that, and so that's how we designed it.
So if this is technically a 1-story, what is the reason for the height?
It's just simple storage up there. They don't have much in the house. And so this was a simple solution in here.
it like, I mean, a stair up to storage, or is it
You go
like?
pull down stair, you know, you go, you know, Christmas decorations, all the things that you don't want either way. That kind of thing. And because we actually, one that we actually got approved was a bigger design. Historic, but couldn't get that past the variance because of what the big. And so even though we had a smaller upper storage area, since we had to make the building smaller and the storage area the same. Just went out there.
When you say the one you got approved, what is it?
So, Becca administratively approved a garage here that had a footprint of 27 feet along the alley by 21 feet in depth. This did have a tipped roof form with a dormer on the east elevation. I wasn't involved in the project at this time, so I don't know the particulars of why Board of Adjustment denied it, but I do know Board of Adjustment denied it. So that's when the applicant came back with the design you saw in December, that the commission expressed concerns over this design that you're seeing today.
And you're saying the BOA denied that because of the square footage?
Right, it was a size, they didn't want to put it coming over because water, it had to do with water drainage. Where's all that water going?
Is there a reason why this footprint couldn't be done in the tipped roof with a dormer design? It wasn't some storage, that's what we were trying to accomplish.
Because with a bigger building, even though it had a different roof design, they still had a good amount of storage. And then when we had to shrink the whole thing, we thought this was a good alternative to still maintain a good amount of storage.
Any other questions? No? Thank you for your time. Right, is there anyone on the line who looking to make a comment on this project? If so, use the hand raise button. No hands raised. All right, so let's move into deliberation unless there's any recap.
I do have a recap. So the Alamo Placido Historic District is a designated historic district. It's designated for its association with the development of Denver from 1889 to 1942. It was the largest subdivision platted in 1889 as Denver's needs for neighborhoods grew. It's also designated for its architectural character, which includes Queen Anne, bungalow, four-square architecture, and a small number of Tudor and Mission Revival style structures. And then it's also designated for its geography along a primary waterway and Denver's parkway system. So while it may not have the architectural character of 1741 Gaylord Street, the overall district is very significant to the history and architectural character of Denver. And I do have both the prior submittal in which the materials were more complex and the current submittal in the presentation, which I did show you, and those have been simplified, but the overall building form and height have not been modified.
Thanks, Brittany. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because I was thinking the same thing. You know, we don't necessarily compare an individually designated property of a very high style nature to a contributing building, or I mean, essentially there could be considered non-contributing with the top not being compliant with our guidelines. Building within a historic district, they're, you know, very different, but we need to look at what this district is about and how this, you know, is compatible or not with the district. So, great. Well, kicking that off, then, what did everybody think?
Please project because our applicants are behind us and we want them to hear.
Feel free to move forward or let us know if you can't hear.
Yeah.
I was, maybe we can talk about guideline 419 that says design a new garage or accessory structure to be compatible with, subordinate to the primary structure, et cetera, et cetera. If the primary structure has a pop-top addition that would not comply with the guidelines today, do we pay attention to
But
that?
it says and surrounding.
I understand that.
Historic
Yeah.
being like the emphasized word that we are talking about, not just sitting in the one.
I was gonna read that. But I guess, okay. I mean, I have trouble accepting this as a compatible addition in any regard. It does sort of.
Compatible garage, yes,
Right.
it's not an addition.
Right, it's compatible in a way to the primary structure, but the primary structure seems to have some difficulties as well. I think by proving this, we're compounding a problem of compatibility in the context of the neighborhood.
Well, and I think that there's ways to still be compatible with the surrounding historic context and with the primary structure. You know, they could still do brick and stucco, you know, to match the primary structure. I don't think it has to be one or the other, but I think it's that surrounding historic context that really was tripping me up, because, I mean, I appreciate that the applicant went and looked at, you know, other examples in the neighborhoods, and that's what you should be doing. But unfortunately, those weren't done under the current guidelines, and they're not historic contexts, they're new. And this is right on the corner too, so it's much more visible than those interior lots that were along the alley there.
Oh, go ahead. No, that's fine.
I think I lost my train of thought, so.
I was just saying, I think the context of historic garages, everything or not, almost everything is a flat roof in the alley. Just not even for a gable roof, which might give you some central storage. Am I really?
Yeah, I
You
can
are.
hear you.
Yeah, you really are.
No, I was just gonna say, I think every other garage that's not a carriage house or modified outside the guidelines is still a flat roof. But the garage is not being individually contributing. Still feel like there's a place where something that has some storage in the attic that isn't a flat roof storage. Yes, potentially a good solution that would more closely meet the guidelines.
I'm actually not so sure, because I'm looking at 4.9B, which just says, design the height of a new garage or accessory structure to be within the range seen in the surrounding historic context. And if in this historic district, their garages are not allowed to be 2 stories, then that will never be, I mean, I think the fact that there's storage above it is a little bit in conflict with this idea that you shouldn't have a 2-story structure. I understand they're probably talking about this question of occupied space or not, but it seems to me that in following that logic, all of the new garages are going to be single story.
There are in the alley kind of a hinged gable a little further down and a shallower gable, which are both newer garages, not historic. But I think we're into the distinction of garages and non-contributing. There's, you know, I don't know if you've ever denied a garage in a basic form, given the diversity of garages in most alleys and historic districts, right? And so I don't disagree, and that I think the majority are flat roofs. But I also don't know if we saying it contributing or non-contributing in our previous precedent there, whether we have required certain garage form or type because of the prevailing style in the alley.
It wasn't the prevailing style, it's the prevailing height.
Understood.
Because 4.19B is not about the form, it's about the height. And so if 2-story structures are not allowed, then it sort of follows that the height in general is going to be a single story. Now, the fact that this is an inflated story height is a little bit unusual, but in fact, the applicant is saying they are going to use that as effectively as a second story. Again, it's not occupied. That's what I meant, not the form, just the.
Yeah.
So I wanted to just say, I'm sorry to hear that that's kind of gone through this process of getting approved and then having that mixed by a different viewing authority. But I kind of along the lines of the roof and the height, I understand what they were trying to accomplish with the roof. Pented roof, I guess I would call it. But I don't think it does anything for the building. I think it actually kind of underscores the incompatibility. So I also have concerns about that in addition to the height. I think the roof form could be different types, but I don't know if it is going to go along with what they're trying to accomplish with this and what we would, as Anne is saying, want to see as far as compatibility within the district itself. So those are my additional thoughts.
Yeah, and I think I have the same concerns with the style of the roof and the asymmetry that Larry had pointed out, which sounds like could be resolved, but I still think the style isn't really compatible with the district. And I understand they were kind of trying to take the angle of the sloped roof on the home and kind of apply it here, but then it flattens off. It doesn't actually go to the true bridge or peak. And but I think also just the windows on the second story and having that decorative stucco detail, these are all things that are just making it look like a two-story structure. And so it's just, I think, in the district, they're simple secondary, garages, and the design just isn't simplified enough. I wonder if there's a way that they can, I know they're sacrificing some storage space because they're maxing out their square footage requirements, but that's a zoning regulation. We don't really have any purview over that. So I wonder if there is a way that they can kind of go back to what sounds like what was approved and, have some dormers so that they can get the square footage that they need in an attic storage space. And it doesn't feel like such a two-story structure. I don't know. I have no problem with the materials proposed.
So that is a possibility. There is an update going on to the zoning code currently that would allow the Landmark Preservation Commission to administratively adjust for these issues. That is anticipated to be adopted in June, July, sometime this summer, correct? So as it's already March now, if the applicant would be willing to wait a few more months at this point, we could potentially place the design that Becca has already approved on the consent agenda for the commission to make a recommendation on that administrative adjustment, because you wouldn't be reviewing the design as it's already approved. It would just be that administrative adjustment, and we could administratively adjust that request. The point of this zoning code update is to not have projects in historic districts go to two different, or one of a commission and then a board who might have conflicting thoughts. You all would have greater authority in that case where if you recommend an administrative adjustment or what would be considered a variance now, it would be recommending administratively to get approved as opposed to having to go through a separate body. That's a big improvement. It's so onerous for applicants now going through us and we're saying different things to them. Yeah. It's not helpful at all. So
it's got to be extremely frustrating.
Yeah. Well, and it sounds like if the applicant's willing to wait a few months, that it might be an easy approval for our suspected already reviewed and the consent agenda. That it seems like if they can wait, it's a win-win situation.
But if they can't,
But there's also the risk that city council, that zoning code has changes have to go to city council. So if there's a delay or council says no, which is rare, but can happen, then there's that.
So, or if they want to move forward because they've already been dealing with this for months.
Yeah.
Can sympathize with that. You know, they can, I guess, take our thoughts and try and make modifications, but I mean, I just don't see today with this application that it's compatible because of the height and the roof form and the articulation that really just does make this look like a two-story building. I understand it's, like Ann said, unoccupied space up there, but it doesn't change how it's viewed from the public vantage points, and that's what we're really here to review. Yeah, I mean, I would agree with Brittany's assessment of the guidelines and that I just don't think it's meeting them.
I agree. If I could just throw one last quick comment, which is more of a friendly comment to the applicant, it did decide to attempt to go down the road of doing the original submission because I faced this issue before. When you have the water drainage issue, often the wastewater department will require that you have a dry well in the space between the house and the garage. And so that would be like an additional cost and may or may not even be feasible depending on what's in there. So just a friendly warning.
Sounds like we're all in agreement.
I create the motion. Great. I move to deny application number 2023-COA-057 for the garage construction at 397 Emerson Street, as per guidelines 4.18 to 4.20. Character defining features for the Alamo Placitas Historic District, present testimony, submitted documentation, and information provided in the staff report.
Erica. Thank you, George, for seconding. All right, I'll call for the motion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? All right, motion passes unanimously. All right, good luck.
I have a question. I know that, just to clarify, so we'll go back and understand how to proceed. What?
You can, I will follow up with you.
Okay.
Yeah, we can set up
Okay. All right, thank you.
Yeah, we do.
All right, thank you all.
Sorry about that. Good luck.
That's all right. We'll figure out.
All right, so the next project up for design review today is 2023-LM Demo-022. It's at 3225 to 3227 West 21st Avenue.
So our next application is for demolition of a non-contributing duplex structure in the Witter Cofield Historic District. It is located right at the western boundary edge of the Witter Cofield Historic District. As you can see in this aerial image here, again, the kind of brown texturing is the historic district, and red is individual landmark structures. So it is two houses down from an individual landmark structure. Here is the front facade, and then here are some additional photos on that structure. So the Witter Cofield Historic District is designated for its architectural character, which is principally Queen Anne in nature, but there are some diverse squares, some terraces, and duplex structures, and four squares within the district, a small number of bungalows as well. This structure is none of those in architectural style. Additionally, the designation application actually calls out the period of significance of 1885 to 1940. However, that was not adopted with the initial designation application. A period of significance was not established until an ordinance update in 2007, which indicated that the period of significance is prior to and including 1943 for the Witter Cofield Historic District. So this structure was constructed in 1955 and is outside of the period of significance established in the designating ordinance and also the period of significance indicated in the designation application. Chapter 30 of the Denver Revised Municipal Code indicates that the Landmark Preservation Commission can make determinations of contributing or non-contributing status on three criteria, and that is whether the feature is listed as contributing or non-contributing in the designating ordinance. So the Whittier Cofield does not have a list of contributing or non-contributing structures. Whether the structure or feature was constructed within the period of significance or the structure of district preservation. So staff are recommending this structure be classified as non-contributing and approved for demolition based on that criteria, as it doesn't meet the period of significance that was indicated in the designation application or the officially ordinance adopted criteria. And then the final criteria, whether the structure or feature contributes to the significance for which the district for preservation was designated. So while Whittier Cofield does have a number of mid-century infill structures, those are not indicated as significant in the designation application materials. Again, it's the Queen Anne, the late 19th, 20th century architecture that doesn't extend up to the mid-century. The ordinance also does say that the commission cannot determine a structure as contributing it without the consent of the homeowner. The homeowner has not requested that it be classified as contributing. So even if you do not allow for the demolition of the structure, you cannot classify it as contributing. But we are recommending you find it non-contributing and approve it for demolition.
Thank you. Any questions for Brittany? Gary?
Well, what does Abby say? I mean, I agree. I agree that I'm not driving towards saying that this structure should be retained, but in districts where there was a period of infills with mid-century modern, what is like, is there at some point a reason to consider those structures as having significance? That's not the case here, and we shouldn't maybe be talking about it, but it comes up.
Then let's not talk about it. I think it's a valuable discussion to have, but not on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah.
And it involves alteration and editing of the designation criteria and opening up the ordinance, which can result in the loss of the historic district. So, you know, valuable discussion. I don't think it should be had on a case-by-case basis, and we should just look at the facts before us today.
Can I just make a comment quickly that it's very, if you look at the district boundaries, it jogs specifically to include.
Yeah, I thought that was. Yeah,
Which is, I kind of wonder, and which was, I mean, the boundary was drawn in the 1990s, and the house was built in the 1950s, so it must have been.
I do wonder if the owner was supportive of the designation and wanted anything to be reviewed.
Yeah,
That could be why.
you know, the back part too is a little funny. I don't know what it looks like, but, the garage, but I don't know, there's some, it's not as clean cut looking, I think, as this, staff report map looks.
I think it's there.
So it's, I also wonder if it was included in order to like have a say over what's happening behind it.
Interesting.
So
It could be any of those various reasons. None of us were here in 1983, so we do not have the documentation on file.
Okay.
All right, well, let's hear from the applicant. You turn off that camera.
Hi there, can you
Thank
guys,
you for your patience.
can you hear us and see
Been
us?
a long meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
well, we can
perfect.
hear you. We can't.
Okay,
Hold on a second, we're moving you. Okay, now you now you should be able to turn your camera on and your audio back on.
okay.
There we go.
Oh, there you go. Hi, my name is David Burton. I am with Real Architecture, 2899 North Spear Boulevard. I have Andre Cuvion with Real Architecture with me and Jordan Fisher behind me back there. So yeah, I just wanted to chat about the project a little bit. So we actually met with Whittier Cofield Historic District on 2 or 3 occasions and went through a lot of information, a lot of details. Actually, this parcel was not included in their original map, and they published a book on the neighborhood, and this parcel is actually not even included in the book, which is really weird. So we met with, like I said, we met with Whittier Cofield. They feel it's non-contributing. We've met with Sloan's Lake Neighborhood Group as well. So that's really all I need to say on this particular portion of it.
We're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the applicant? Not regarding the demolition, maybe? Okay. Well, thank you for your time.
Do you want to just leave this for the applicant for the next? Yeah, we're gonna leave you here. Just stay on mute if you could.
Then, I do have one recap. We're
Well,
recommending.
let's do public comment. Yeah. Is there anyone on the line who would like to make a public comment on this project? Please use the hand raise button at this time. So,
Nope, no one's raising.
okay, cool. What's your recap?
We're just recommending conditional approval because the ordinance requires a replacement plan or structure.
And actually, David, could you all turn your camera off just to make the commission meeting bigger on screen? Thank you, and we'll let you know when it's back on.
The logistics of a hybrid meeting.
Yeah.
Right. All right, so let's move into deliberation. Thoughts on demo only, review until next meeting. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty straightforward. It's not contributing.
Gary and I are on the mid-century wavelength.
Yeah, I mean,
I know.
I'm in the mid-century house.
Yeah, I don't disagree either.
No, we need to start
At
like,
some point, there won't be,
At some point,
except in mid-century neighborhoods.
Yeah, we can't really do anything about it when it's already like a designated district and it says that's particularly not contributing to it. So we just-
I guess my comment was hoping was, are there districts where mid-century infills may be part of this history that the staff has identified for future study, and whether this particular district is or is not one of those? That's what I was looking.
We have not, and the one that does include mid-century is Wyman because it goes up to 1965. So there's not a lot of, there are not many single family, but there are mid-century small apartment buildings in the Wyman Historic District over north and east of Capitol. Those are contributing. Well, interesting conversation to continue.
that being said, Madam Chair, I'll make the motion to conditionally approve application 2023-LN-Demo-022 for demolition of the primary structure and garage at 3225 and 3227 West 21st Avenue with the condition that replacement structure or site plan be approved by the Landmark Preservation Commission prior to issuance of the approval for design guideline 2.55, section 30-11, 30-6, section 6E of the Denver Revised Municipal Code. Presented testimony, submitted documentation, and information provided.
Thank you, Graham.
I'll second.
Thank you, Larry, for seconding. All right. I'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Great. Motion passes unanimously. So, same address, but we're now reviewing 2023-COA-058, which is the application for the infill. So now we will be looking at a duplex infill at the same property. Here you can see the location of the property again. It is at the edge of the Whittier Historic District and the proposed duplex structure, which will have two primary entrances facing the street. So in terms of this project proposal, generally staff feel that the placement on the lot is typical of the surrounding historic context. There's 5-foot setback. It does have a front yard, and the garage structures, which are two separate garages for each duplex unit, is located at the rear. This is an extremely deep lot. However, staff do have some concerns over the front yard setback of this structure. So
The zoning typically requires an average of the front yard setback for placement on the lot. And because you have some non-historic structures and historic structures and the setbacks vary on this lot, this is meeting the zoning requirements for setback on the lot. However, staff feels that it could have better alignment with the two historic structures that face onto this block. So that's another issue with this block, is that not many houses actually face onto this block. These two historic structures that you see in this image here do. The structure will, and then the structure to the west also faces onto this lot, but there's not really a lot that directly addresses West 21st Avenue. But looking at the ground plan comparison, it does appear that the structure will be forward of the historic structures that are on the block. The individual landmark structure, which is the lower structure in this image, has very, very large front yard, very, very large side yard. And then the other historic structure, which is the top one, it does appear that it will be forward of that, but just minimally, ever so slightly minimally so. So staff are recommending that this be restudied in terms of placement on the lot. Because this lot is so deep, it can be moved back and still be within the front 65 of the lot. So we are recommending that the placement on the lot be restudied and better aligned with the historic structures on the lot, but it does meet the zoning requirements for placement on the lot. So moving along, again, this is a duplex structure. It will have partial width porches, just separating each duplex unit and providing a personalized entrance on the structure. It does have forward projecting massing, and then that entrance is recessed back on the west and east side respectively for each unit. It is 2 stories in nature with a gable roof, 3rd floor penthouse, and rooftop access. That 3rd floor is not significantly visible from the public right-of-way because it's set so far back from the primary facade. So here you can just see the general floor plans of that proposal. And here is the front elevation and rear elevation of the structure. So this structure is within the height and bulk plane of the zone district. The heights are typical for the surrounding historic context. It is based on the terrace form, which is traditionally a 1-story form within this district. However, the commission has approved 2-story forms within this district based off the 1-story terrace form. And again, that 3rd floor is set back over 18 feet from the primary facade, so it's not significantly visible from the public right-of-way. In terms of floor-to-floor heights, they are typical for the surrounding historic context. However, staff feel that the windows on the front elevation on the 2nd floor could be moved up to better represent typical floor-to-floor heights of the neighborhood. So we are asking that those move up just a little bit in the wall plane on the facade to be more typical of the surrounding historic context. We don't have those concerns on the secondary elevations as much as we do allow greater flexibility on those secondary elevations. This structure, again, is proposing to have simple square openings. There is a little bit of play and window sizes on the structure, but towards the front of the building and to the back of the building, they are more traditional in nature. We won't be looking at the design details at this time, but they are showing a traditional header and sill placement on those portions of the building. And here you can see that partial width porch that extends to one bay on one window bay opening for each unit. This is the rear elevation and the, I believe this is the west elevation. They will need to update their application materials to indicate the cardinal directions, but I don't have that as a condition. That's just required for permitting. You can't use front, left, rear side, but this is the west and north elevation here, which is the rear and side elevation as well. Again, similar in design for the side elevation as the other elevation you saw. This elevation is facing the non-historic portion of the neighborhood as the boundary does end right there. Again, within the height floor plane here, so we don't have a recommendation on that. In terms of how this fits in with the surrounding context, again, this one is really complicated because not many houses front onto West 21st Avenue, and the district boundary does end right at this property. So the property to the west is a non-historic infill structure, also a duplex that we did not review as it's not within the neighborhood. And then to the right and east are two historic Queen Anne structures. The one at the corner is also an individual landmark structure, but the height of this structure is subordinate to the height of both of these historic contributing structures, even with the third floor penthouse level. So as that is set back 18 feet from the street level, this will have minimal visual impact on the historic structures, which is something we encourage for our new development. Again, typical floor-to-floor heights that we would like to see those second floor windows up just a skosh. And that's based on looking at the compatibility demonstrations within this neighborhood. So again, most of the duplex forms within this neighborhood are one-story in nature, but there is a rare two-story multifamily unit in this district, and you can see that those windows are a little bit higher on the second floor within the wall plane, and it doesn't have as high of a building forehead as the project proposal. There also could be design details that help with that higher forehead, but we don't have that as a condition right now. So generally, staff are recommending conditional approval of this project with a few minor adjustments, and those include restudy of the building setback to be within typical ranges of the historic structures and respect the alignment of the two contributing structures on the block. And again, that would be possible because the lot is so deep here, and it would still be within the front portion of the lot. Adjust the second floor window placement in the wall plane on the front side to be higher to match the district pattern for placement for second floor windows. And then this is kind of minor, but also not. There are no elevations provided of the garage structure. We do typically review those administratively when it's just the garage that comes in for review. But when we are reviewing infill, we do look at the garage as well as part of the infill development. The garage does appear to be, the two garages do appear to be simple boxy forms, probably flat roofed in nature. They do have doors that face onto the alley, and I can determine all this from site plan, but I will need elevations of those garages in the middle.
Brittany, any questions? I just have a question about that garage condition, and it's just that since we don't know what it looks like, and normally our conditions are like a weird check the box. Sure. Yeah, how does that work? I mean, it's going to come back for design details anyway, so I don't know that it's a big concern. It could be anything. So by us having a condition base just provides elevations, we're not finding that we're approving whatever it looks like, are we?
No, you're not, because it is the second review that is required. I don't know the height of these structures, so you could say something to the effect that it complies with the height and district character. So you could pull more language, more of the design guide language and be a little more specific than just provide elevations.
Or you could also say something to the effect of if the garages don't meet the design guidelines and the switch guidelines, then it has to go back to the commission for individual review or something like that.
I mean, the condition says to ensure they comply with guidelines 1.19, which I think covers all of that. I don't really know if we need to say more.
That's very cool. All right, any other questions for staff? Okay, So it's the same applicant as we had just heard from. Feel free to turn your video and audio back on. And you don't have to share your names and addresses again. You could just go ahead and forward when you're ready.
Great, thank you so much. So, yeah, we appreciate everyone's time today. We did, as I did mention, meet with Whittier Cofield Historic District a few different occasions. And we did make modifications as we went with both Whittier, Cofield, and with staff. And, you know, we apologize. We totally spaced out putting the garage in here, but we'll work with staff to get an appropriate mass and scale of the garage that'll comply with the guidelines. Additionally, we have no problem moving to align with the historic buildings to our east. When we originally set this building, we basically set it halfway in between the new duplex that's to the west and the historic buildings to the east, kind of trying to bridge the and form a transition from the historic district to the much more modern buildings that are to the west of this project. So, but I think there's no problem setting it back to align with the historic buildings. Just on a note on this particular sketch, for some reason, we're not showing the porches on historic buildings or the building to our west, but we are showing the porches on our building. So that's why it might even seem like it's much more in front. When we did some calculations, we're about 4 feet in front of the building to our east, and we have no problem moving it back to a line. Additionally, we'll definitely take staff comments into consideration for the windows on the second floor. And we feel like we can raise those windows up to kind of more fill in the space of the wall. The terrace form typically has these type of punched openings, and you know we'll get to, I guess, openings and details and brick coursing as we move forward through the process to the next step of this phase 2. Andre, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I guess the only thing that I would add is that, you know, the windows on the front, you know, on the second floor, you know, obviously above that, we are using that, you know, the space above that is the parapet wall. You know, it's actually the guardrail for the, for like a roof area up there. And so that's part of, you know, that's part of kind of the high eyebrow. So, you know, we've talked about a couple of ways that we could address that. We'd also be interested in hearing any of the commission's thoughts or ideas regarding that as well.
Yeah, and we'll answer any questions you guys have as well.
Thanks for your time.
Yeah,
Are there any questions for the questions? I think you hit all the main points. All right, then let's go ahead and open it up for public comment. Is there anyone on the line who would like to make a comment on this project? If so, use the hand raise button. Okay.
I think everyone is lulled to sleep by the long meeting, not by this application.
Yes. Thanks for thinking it out with us. Okay, then let's move into deliberation. So we've heard that the applicants are open to addressing the comments or the conditions that Brittany recommended. Thoughts on the application?
I think it looks like a fine design, contribute well to the amongst the neighborhood. And when you look at that porch to the right in the illustrations, I don't know what direction said, complex doesn't count.
Yeah.
And those railings, so I would certainly approve it. They're well aware of the conditions, and it looks like they will be easily met. So, and then,
yeah, I agree with you know, the staff report and the conditions that were put forth. I know the applicant was looking for kind of a little bit of feedback, given that there is a parapet wall up the middle. And I mean, I think that really goes into design details. You could address it lots of ways. I could see maybe, you know, since you're raising the parapet just in that center portion. I wonder if maybe your cornice detail is taller in that portion, and that's how you kind of bridge your flanking sides. Because you show kind of right now, they're showing there's kind of this soldier course, at the top, and it's all the same at each height. But I could see maybe there's some other detail in that center portion so that you don't have to move your windows up quite so much. You'll still have to adjust your windows, right? They're pretty low, hence the recommendation for the condition. But maybe that's a way to start to bridge and fill that space so that it feels more in unison with those flanking sides, and you're kind of juggling that parapet being your railing. Just my 2 cents. Take it or leave it. Up to you.
I actually don't think this design meets 4.4. Which is to say, design the height, mass, and form of a new building to be compatible with the historic context. Now, maybe the context, given the compatibility, can we pull the compatibility on your maybe this is a very limited compatibility, but I think it's A9.
But
yeah. To me, the new design has no compatibility with the 2 existing historic structures to the right. It's compatible, very compatible with the non-historic one to the left.
But that's their streetscape.
There's 810 compatibility. Okay, let's look at compatibility. To me, it just doesn't, it does not, I'll go back to 4.4. Design the height, mass, and form of the new building be compatible with the historic context. To me, it just doesn't look compatible. It looks like a lump. And the 2 structures that are actually on the block are articulated and sloping roofs. It doesn't seem to me compatible with these 2 single-story houses, single-story units, because it's 2 stories. So it's not the same 2 stories. It's sort of an Italianate that's been plugged in here. And maybe design details will help to articulate it, but it's blocked. And it doesn't seem to me, actually, perhaps the one on the left, it could have some mediating roofing that would make it less of a stark block. But to me, I just don't see what is historic about it. In what way it satisfies guideline 4.4.
Yeah, I think it's probably closest to 3039 West 21st, which was the one on the far right.
1 2-story.
Yeah.
Story terrace.
There are a couple of those in the district. So it's familiar. I think it is right on the edge of the district, and the context of that one block is unique. The next block, which is in the district, has even fewer contributing homes on it. Across the street is totally different. So this one being the furthest, tiniest corner has a tough time with context, because 4 or 5 blocks north, you do have a really sort of Queen Anne cluster of style. I know that location in the district doesn't determine historic context, but I think immediate context in this block has changed a lot in 10 years, based on being the edge of the block. But it also is tough because you've got 2 fairly monumental gable fronted buildings, which are very characteristic of the district. But this sort of softens that edge into similar shapes. That doesn't speak to the guideline, but I think that the overall neighborhood context of this is something that sort of reaches across that boundary.
I just want to say, this isn't like to address comments specifically, but the compatibility demonstration can be taken from any structure within the district. It doesn't have to be within a radius. It's any structure within the district. So that is why we do ask for the streetscape study and the compatibility demonstration, just for clarity on what those worksheets look like that we give to our applicants.
I can say that I don't think that this will have any sort of detracting effort or effect on at that context, based on its Italian and historic style and massing. I'm gonna have to get my phone like.
Yeah, I agree, Graham, in that, you know, I feel like this is very similar to two-story terrace infill that we've approved for Baker, which has a similar, yes, a similar range of architectural styles with the districts. And so I mean, just in that way, I'm not, I understand your concerns, but I do think ultimately does meet 4.4 considering the entire district. And I also don't think it's a bad thing that it does kind of provide this transition to the much more modern, truly boxy building, modern building to the west.
Yeah, I agree, and I think the much lower kind of primary massing of this is subordinate to the kind of two neighbors in a way that I feel like is respectful of its context in that particular way, sort of similar to what we would consider with an addition to a structure. The one thing that does give me a little bit of pause, and I'm curious how other commissioners feel, is, and I think unfortunately the rendering, the angle that the rendering is from kind of heightens this concern, is the gable of the penthouse and whether from across the street it actually might be kind of visible and have this like almost like a little temple front stacked on top of this terrace style duplex. Yeah, I'm curious what other people feel about that.
That actually, I knew exactly as you started to raise it, I was like, he's going to talk about the gable roof, because that definitely immediately kind of made me pause a little bit. I mean, I'm assuming it's just the heaviness of the eave line too, just seems overwhelming a little bit at that level. I think the rendering in that it's a darker color made it seem a little easier to swallow, but I don't know.
It's an interesting block too, because the very Queen Anne house on the corner is probably up almost 42 inches from the sidewalk, and then you step down and the gable front house next to this one is still 6 steps up from the sidewalk, perhaps 30 inches, and then there's a roll down, and then you are almost flat. So you have kind of a strange varying of heights that are playing in some ways against this. It's putting it lower instead of higher, so you push it out of view. But it's kind of a unique block for that reason also. And so I think that, you know, you are going to have the height is going to be pushed quite a ways back. And if it's being pushed even further back on the lot as part of the site, that'll help to minimize it perhaps.
And if they're looking at a different parapet design on the front, raising that a little bit or more articulation could offset some of the view of penthouse.
Actually, I would say totally the opposite, which is if they lowered the parapet wasn't brick, because the thing that I think actually works in this is that pitch, because at least it gives the building something that doesn't make it a brick block.
Yeah, it is.
And so
I'm not bothered by the pitch of the gable roof. I'm just thinking of how they could look at it in the next iteration.
No, but what I was going to say is to follow up on that, actually, I think it would be more successful if the parapet was low, the brick line of the parapet was lowered, and you saw more of that and more articulation in the in the parapet, which is also the corners or whatever this is, and you saw more of that. But I'm just worried that this is a very squat brick block, lump, and because it's a double house, it's a wider lump than you would have in an Italianate, and that it needs something more to articulate it because it's got the world's most articulated home on the corner. I mean, it's really like, I don't know who came up with that diagonal, but I would like to meet something.
There's actually two of those in the city.
It's so great.
Is that right?
Yeah.
The half.
It's really great, and I just think that this one looks sort of lumpy. And there are ways of probably.
Gary, I feel like you were about to say something. Are you?
No, I
No.
was,
Oh, okay.
I was reacting to that. Not knowing the sister house.
I'm pretty sure, maybe even in the book that they mentioned it. I hope I didn't make that up. I'm almost positive I didn't. Anyway.
It sounds like we're a little split on that. I like that the parapet gets taller in the middle. I think it relates more to their compatibility study of that one property where it is two-story terrace type. So I actually think that that is successful, and I worry that the railing will just draw more attention if you're seeing more railing than roof. So I kind of like the balance they struck with seeing a little bit of railing on each side, and really having this, brick raised up in the center. I guess I haven't really looked much at that sloped roof, but now that it's called out, I don't have big concerns over it, but I think making it more prominent is not the way to go. I mean, it doesn't really relate to the sloped roofs of the adjacent structures because it's such a low slope. So, I mean, to me, if it was flat, I'd be fine with that because at least it really right the rest of it. Oh, great.
So I personally struggled with the house roof. Ultimately, I didn't call attention to it though, because it's very similar to a form approved down in the Baker Historic District. Pretty recently by the commission. That is not to say that every project sets a precedent, you have to allow it, but I did evaluate it based on the fact that it is set back 18 feet. And that was my ultimate conclusion on it, but feel free to discuss amongst yourselves.
Well, I guess if you can't see it from the street, you'd be worried about it. And looking at that upper level floor plan, there's a lot of sort of undefined wall space. So if they just push the facade of that upper floor back even further, so it's even less visible, we have a concern about the roof shape at all.
Or, yes, do a demonstration, like the visibility from across the street,
that
maybe would be helpful.
Yeah.
It's just because this rendering was placed, in this angle, it looks very visible. Going off of what's presented.
I mean, they are going to be pushing it back, the whole building back too. I don't know, can we make condition, assuming that what you were suggesting, Larry, would be like a conditional approval, but could we do that and then ask them to provide a study that then might show something different that then we don't approve?
So that's more of a denial, we're like,
Right.
have to restudy stuff.
Exactly. Of that level.
I don't know. I personally don't have enough of a concern over it because it is set back. I don't know, to deny it, but I'm okay with whatever everybody else feels.
I guess I also really pointed out the neighborhood didn't have a problem with it either. And they're ultimately.
Well, outside of the historic context of the district, we squeezed the third floor, stepped back inside of the bulk plane to maximize square footage. Every other building, So in the modern context, it's the historic context. So I think frankly, a lot of the projects balance nicely without that third floor projection on top of it, but ultimately that's allowed within the central code. So I don't see that as an issue.
Yeah, and I mean, it typically within our guidelines, taking you back to the guidelines, I'm struggling to find which one it's related to, but we request that, you know, be setback kind of houses like that. So I think that they are doing everything that we, you know, typically request of a lot of space.
We talked about 15 feet, Brittany's got 18 separate, so.
Yeah.
Setback.
Yeah, I just want to clarify, I didn't receive a letter from the RNO, but I 100% know this applicant did work with the RNO and responded to RNO comments.
Sounds like then there's consensus that
Yeah.
we're all comfortable with it, and I just wanted to, yeah.
All right, well, if we're reaching consensus, does someone want to try a motion?
Actually, let me just say one more thing. Sorry, one more thing, and this is just a friendly comment. So guideline 4.12 says design a new duplex or townhouse to be compatible with the mass and scale of adjacent single-family dwellings. Divide a duplex or townhouse into modules that reflect the typical width of single-family dwellings or adjacent properties. And I have to say that, then this is something that could happen in design details, that probably would help my perception of this as being a very large, undifferentiated block, which I understand we're not in design details. But I think a friendly comment to from my perspective is looking at that kind of division would help to break up the mass. And it is a guideline 4.2.
Thanks, Dan, for the friendly comment. All right, who's going to make the motion?
Oh, Madam Chair, I will. I move to conditionally approve application 2023-CUA-058 for the phase 1 mass form and context at 3225-3227 West 21st Avenue as per design guidelines 4.1 through 4.6, 4.8, 4.15, 4.18, character defining features for the Whittier Caulfield Historic District, presented testimony, submitted documentation and information provided in the staff report with the following conditions. 1, restudy the building setback to be within typical ranges of the historic structures and respect the alignment of the 2 contributing historic structures on the block per guideline 4.2A and C. Number 2, adjust second floor window placement in the wall seat of the front facade to be higher to match district patterns for placement of second floor windows for guideline 4.3C, 4.4C, 4.8C, and 3, provide elevations of the garage structures and ensure they comply with guidelines.
Thank you, Julie.
I'd like to make an amendment. For some reason, guideline 4.12, to which I was just alluding, was not listed. So I suggesting it be added.
Great.
I accept.
Okay, great. All right. There's no further discussion on the motion. I'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? All right, motion passes unanimously, and we'll be back when you've got your design details together. Okay, then one thing, so thank you to the next and final applicant. We're on our last design review project, 2023-COA-059 at 120 Franklin Street.
So Abby's giving this presentation, which is me. I'm presenting to Abby. She is out today, but I have a full write-up for her, and I will try to go as fast as I can. So this building was constructed in 1909, designed by Fisher & Fisher Architects, and is a contributing building to the Country Club Historic District. Shown on the right is a rear addition constructed in the mid-1960s, which the applicant is proposing to remove and replace with a new addition. Sanborn maps show that 120 Franklin Street, that's the address, originally featured a front porch with attached garage at the rear. But between 1961 and 1967, the house took on its current configuration with the front porch removed and a rear addition and attached garage and porch onto the side yard were added to the change between 1961 and 1967. The applicant is proposing to demolish the non-historic rear addition and replace it with a side and rear addition. The applicant has worked very closely with Landmark staff on the development of the design, exploring multiple siting and height options for the addition. The applicant explored placing the addition entirely to the rear, but this created a single, massive, rectangular form that was atypical of the Country Club Historic District. Staff find the current proposed addition to be more compatible with district patterns. With the construction almost entirely within the rear 35% of the lot, visual impact will be reduced and the sense of spaciousness retained. The proposed addition will have a minimal impact on the original historic fabric. The addition will be a simplified version of the original structure, featuring a hitched roof with a deep eave overhang, but without the decorative brackets on the original structure. The applicant has set the height of the addition down from the historic structure in order to keep it subordinate. Windows will feature simulated divided lights matching the fenestration on the original structure. The rear of the addition features 2 projecting bays. The bays feature different footprints of roof boards, increasing the complexity of this addition design. But since these are on the rear, they will have limited impact on the overall design. A new single-story attached garage is proposed at the rear of the 2-story addition. The new attached garage will replace a non-historic attached garage. While detached garages are more common in the Country Club Historic District, attached garages were also used historically in this district. The garage will be accessible via the alley and is compatible with the scale and form of the district. The existing south elevation is shown at the top, with the proposed new elevation shown at the rear. The new addition steps down in height to maintain subordinates to the historic district. Minimal alterations to the original structure are proposed. The 2 window openings towards the rear will be altered. Some non-historic window alterations on the north will be changed, with glass block replaced and contemporary window designs replaced with multi-light sash windows that reflect the historic window patterns. Materials will be constructed of reclaimed brick, which will be painted to match the rest of the house. Windows and doors will be aluminum clad wood with simulated divided lights. The applicant is proposing to replace the current asphalt shingle roof with a Brava roof tile, a synthetic cedar shake. Based on Sanborn maps, it appears that the original roofing material was wood, so an X on the corner of a building indicates wood shingle roof. An engineered roofing product designed to imitate shake is an appropriate replacement for this. The 2-story addition as proposed violates zoning requirements. It will be located in the rear 35% of the lot and will violate the zoning maximum height of 17 feet. The applicant is proposing to exceed that by 10 feet, 1.5 inches. The applicant is requesting an administrative adjustment for height. The LCC may approve an administrative adjustment for buildings or additions that violate code required height if the LCC finds it conforming with the zoning code restrictions which have an adverse impact on the historic character of the individual landmark or historic district. This is based on section 12.4.5.3 of the Denver zoning code. Staff would recommend an administrative approval for this, since zoning would allow the applicant to add a 2-story addition to the side of the historic property as shown on the right. If the addition were moved forward to the front 65 of the lot, then there would be no conflict with zoning. However, moving the addition would have a negative impact on the fabric of the historic structure and the district's character. By pushing the addition into the rear 35%, the applicant has made this addition more compatible with the district and has avoided an adverse impact on the historic structure. So staff is recommending approval of the addition and the administrative adjustment request.
Great. Any questions? Jim?
Cool, because I can't answer them.
Great. The applicant present?
He's raised his hand, looks like.
Great. Please start with your name and address for the record. Thanks for holding tight. I know it's been a long meeting. The time is yours. And we're not hearing you, so you may have to unmute.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah, there we go. John Mattingly, 517 East Bayot Avenue, Denver, 80209. We have gone back and forth quite a bit with Abigail trying to understand this one, and ultimately have come to this conclusion. We did several studies, as briefly was mentioned, on keeping the addition to the back, but it looked like a giant barge, kind of like what's there now. And so we felt like this was actually more gentle than the addition that's there today, not as massive as you could see on the, what sheet that was, that south elevation. You're seeing the side form itself is actually smaller than the existing addition that's there. And so we set it down 14 inches. You can see in this image right here that the doors, which would be a family room addition, you can see that they're at a lower plane than the historic building. So you do actually inside the building step down into the addition area. And we did that to create that subordination going off to the right. So you can see that change in plane. That's actually 14 inches. That is the depth change that we're doing there, where the two roof pitches come together and they're different. We're doing the reclaimed brick this is a hard pressed brick that's on this house with the butter joint, and they're square edge, nice and clean. So we propose to use the same hard pressed brick, but in demolition, they get broken. And so there will be a pretty strong textural change by seeing the chipped edges of the brick on the addition. So I think that further differentiates it as well. We are glad to see that the cedar shingles had been called out on that roof. The house next door, which is a Fisher and Fisher design, also has a tile roof on it, which looks fabulous. This one, I think, will get the same texture that it would have had from a shake cedar and an improvement over the asphalt. Most of the windows in this building, the original building, are historic, except for there's a couple that are still in question, so those aren't in proposal at the moment. But the majority of these are old lead weight double hung windows and really cool. And so you can see in this image that we're on at the moment, the north elevation, the massing of the addition that's there now, and the massing of the proposed. I think we're scaling it actually down in this iteration, but there was just nowhere else to go in the front 65 and not violate the existing historical building and its side yard context. So it also steps back 4 inches in plane. So there's a differentiation on that side, on the north side as well. So overall, we were pretty happy with the outcome and working with Abigail to find this solution to respect that yard, the large side yard of the house itself. And so turns out historically the front doors were those two front doors that you're seeing right now. That are, yes, exactly. And it's since been changed to the side entry, which I've seen both iterations in country club and historic buildings. And I initially thought those were just patio doors because normally they are, but at one point they were actually the entry. But we're keeping the entry off to the side, which I don't know that we have an image of that. It's just that's the way the house is organized inside now, and it works really well. So, but the rest of the facade and all of that is being left alone. And so it's really house is in fantastic shape. And the idea was just to do an addition that allowed us to respect that and delineate the addition from the original building and keep as much open space as possible. So that was the goal, and I feel like we captured it. Am I missing anything more?
Yep. That's good.
So I appreciate all the help we got from Landmark and write up, and that's all I have.
Thank you. Thank you. Any questions?
I had one question about the brackets on the north side of the original house. You're proposing to move them further west, I believe, closer to the street. I think I'm reading that right, away from the corner. I presume because of the way the new addition would work, but I was wondering if you could speak a little bit more about your thought process behind that.
Well, we have a window in play there in that roof eave because the roof is lower. It's going to be projecting down underneath there. It's kind of an interesting little spot, but that's the reason for moving those brackets, is that with that change in height, that's what the roof is going to be doing with that overhang. And so, and we are inserting that window back in that corner as well where the brackets were. So that's the reason for that move.
And currently there's not a return where there's brackets on the east
No,
side.
it's all on one plane. That addition goes straight off the back, and we're setting ours in and lowering the plane. You can see on that addition that's there now, there's those high slider windows up there, kind of a weird condition. We're getting rid of that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? All right, thanks for your time. Is there anyone on the line who would like to make a comment on this project? If so, please use the hand raise button at this time.
Hands raised. Okay.
Okay. All right,
And for the record, Larry had to leave. Emailed me and saying, so he's not here for this.
just
Okay, right.
to know that it's coming back, right?
Yeah, his laptop's there. Yeah.
Okay. All right, so let's move into deliberation. What did everybody think about this edition?
I agree with the staff report. I definitely think the addition placement is much more appropriate than what would be required by zoning. I think the only thing that gave me slight pause was the brackets, and I just don't know if they should really be even reapplied to where they are, because there are no other brackets on the house except at the corners. And they wouldn't be at the corners by being placed where they are. I'm not, particularly glad to see them go.
Yeah.
And I guess if other commissioners agree with me, I guess I would recommend that we keep them. I know we can't require that, but that's my only thought. But otherwise, I thought it met the guidelines very well, and I would approve it.
I see what you're saying. I don't know, I'm kind of on the fence because it's like not very visible, and it seems like at least if they're reattached somewhere, they're not lost.
Right.
Yeah, and that it would be clear as to why they were moved, like I think that one could deduce that later, like, even owners removed from this, one could probably figure that out, but based on how the new addition is linking in and reuse them if they wanted. So I guess I'd be more inclined to just keep it just so that they're not lost, because we really can't guarantee that
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but I see what you're saying. I would like to commend the applicant for the sheet that they provided about the administrative adjustments that they're requesting. It was very helpful. And I do agree with staff, assessment and the process. I appreciate the process that the applicant went through to kind of look at, citing this towards the rear. And so I would support the administrative adjustment request, and I think that it's the right position for the addition. And looking at the street view, it's really unique, actually, how this street kind of has these like little areas of landscaping that are rounded out. So I thought that was kind of interesting. It's at a really interesting intersection, and I don't think it'll be highly visible set back so far. And it's kind of right as the street curves, so it's like even further back from where do you think?
I think that I agree that I think that the footprint seems very appropriate, even not meeting all the zoning and so forth. I think there's a little bit of a problem, or something I see if you look at the rear elevation. I'm looking at L27 with how the two roofs come together, the addition and it's a very elegant design. There's so many nice things, and that seems to be, and this also has a little bit of bracket, which may be left over from I don't know what, but it seems like there's maybe a better resolution than those two roofs. And that is such a critical point, because it's the point where the old meets the new. And it really is, I think this design seems very, very appropriate, but as a friendly comment, I think it's worth looking at that corner again.
It seemed rather abrupt.
It seems rather, for something that's so beautifully thought out.
Yeah, the rest of it is so elegant, it seemed a little bit out of character, but not being an architect, I don't quite know what to suggest.
I don't disagree with you. When you look at L27, I think it looks worse than when you look at the elevation, though, because you're seeing the patch of the brick where there's kind of an outline there, so it looks like it's in conflict with something. But if you look at the elevation on L23, it looks like it is a little bit set back from that window. Like, I wonder if it's not, if the perspective makes it look worse than it
That's
is.
quite possible.
I don't know.
Well, I think it's an issue of not having the cornice lines don't line up, and they don't line up, which is fine, but I think if cornice lines don't line up, then maybe where the two come together, you're sort of obligated to figure out some resolution that makes it look deliberate. We see lots of, cases where there's some kind of a reveal or something between the old and the new, and maybe something that would help the situation. But as I said, I think the siding seems very appropriate, and the level of detailing seems great. It's like a really success. It's just that one kind of funny one.
It looks like everybody's in agreement. Okay, well then, yeah, who wants to make the motion?
Madam Chair, if you can hear me, I would like I move to approve application number 2023-COA-059 for the addition at 120 Franklin Street as per Country Club Design Guidelines B3, B4, and B7, Design Guidelines 2.27, 3.4 through 3.9, and 4.18. Character defining features for the Country Club Historic District, presented testimony, submitted documentation, and information provided in the staff report. I also move to recommend the administrative adjustment for the height per section 12.4.5.3 of the Denver zoning code, finding that the conformance to the requirements of the zoning code would have an adverse impact upon the historic district.
Second. Thank you, Graham, for the motion, and Erica for seconding. Call for the vote. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstained? All right, motion passes unanimously, and Larry was not present for that. Correct. So we have 8 votes on that. Okay, so thanks, everybody. That's the end of the meeting. There are no business or discussion.
Last meeting. One last thing.
You gotta see it again. Are you serious?
Yeah. Oh, wait,
Awesome.
former chair scaffold. Yeah.
I don't remember that. Oh, that's funny.
Now you have your own. Wow.
Oh my God. Well, my husband will love that. I will win every argument.
You need to grab for it.
Well, thank you.
Sorry.
Yeah, so, yeah, this is my last meeting. It would be next meeting since I'm up in March, but I won't be here. Because I'll have already had the kids, so.
Thanks for being an awesome chair.
Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate it. You guys are the best. The staff is like amazing. And I've really enjoyed working with all of you. Got a good group of commissioners right now. And Julie, I still have never been able to attend a meeting that you chair, but I hear it's amazing.
Here's more there.
Much more efficient. And
No, not at all. Not at all.
So you're in good team. If you elect to be chair. Well, thank you.
It's all very exciting.
Yeah, and we'll
Send us a picture.
Okay. I'll send a picture
again.
Problem is not sending too many pictures, right?
Whatever.
Never a problem.
They bomb us.
And Erica has, offered to do it get together, so it's not goodbye forever. I'll be around. Well, thank you all. Thank you. And I guess I'll close the meeting and I'll use the gavel.
Hey,
Oh, it's 5:06.
and then we're gonna hear out of the TV screen.